Courtside the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC podcast, episode number 341. Andrew with you once again, joined once again by my co-host, Derek, also known in the forum as D for 3.
I'm happy to be here again.
It's another week of playing NBA 2K21, Derek. We have a new patch out, although not on PC.
Yeah, I mean, the Live King brought this up. I think he actually returned the game as well. I think he posted on Twitter, he said he returned NBA 2K21 because he was, like, super frustrated with it. But I'm pretty sure that there's a thread that was created on the NLSC that said, you know, where is the PC patch? And then I guess it was TG So Good or somebody else that reached out to 2K support, and they apologized that the patch hadn't been out there yet, and they said that they were working on it, and it's still not out there. So correct me if I'm wrong, but it's been about a week since the PS4, roughly a week, since the PS4 and Xbox One got the patches, but PC still doesn't have it.
It's about 4 or 5 days from when we're recording this, or 5 or 6 actually. It's so it is definitely delayed compared to the console patches, which is not uncommon, unfortunately. It is actually with and we'll get more into this as we talk about the patch and everything that's going on this week. But it is it's one of those things where it's probably going to come through as soon as we finish recording, right? That's how it usually works with our podcast. The news breaks just as we finish recording. Not uncommon with us, unfortunately, as I put that disclaimer out the other week. But it is with QA branch with Steam, so it has actually been submitted. So it's not 2K dragging their feet on it. It's with Steam, so hopefully it comes through very soon, because it is frustrating because it does have some necessary fixes, and yeah, we really want to have that the same support on PC. So yeah, that's the fingers crossed on that one.
Yeah, for me, I think what's been nice is, as opposed to just playing 2K21 or, you know, getting frustrated with my team or you know, in between modding, which I'm putting out an all-time teams roster with no duplicates. I'm working on that right now.
I saw. Very cool.
For PC, which I'm excited about because I haven't done one of those since 2K17. But what's been enjoyable for me is just mixing up the games I play. And, you know, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but I've been mixing up, you know, playing Dunk Lords. I've been playing NBA Jam 2010 for the PlayStation 3. I've been playing PBA Basketball Slam. And my brother and I played a couple games of NBA 2K19, the 91-92 season, the Stildo roster, etc. So I love having, you know, the variety and being able to mix it up. And I think that's one cool thing about collecting all of these games is you just always have, you know, if you get bored with one title or whatnot, you can always jump to another one.
It is, and I kind of, it's hard to say without seeming condescending, I suppose, but I feel sorry in a way for people who can't go back to games that they enjoy or can't enjoy a well-rounded selection of basketball games, that it has to be the latest game. And I suppose that when it comes down to being an online game, competitive, it really has to be the latest game. But to be able to mix it up, as you say, with other games and be able to try the different genres, both with arcade and sim, and the whole spectrum of the whole scale of arcade and sim approaches to virtual basketball with the games, it's definitely great to have that collection, and it's one of the reasons why I enjoy having that collection. Obviously, it's for content creation as well as you do with the site, but with your YouTube and everything else, and modding with the NLSC community. But yeah, definitely some things that I love to catch up on this week, because we've both been playing a few different games apart from NBA 2K21, but we are going to talk about the 2K21 patch. We've got some other issues that have been affecting 2K21 that we need to touch on with VC and corrupted saves and whatnot, and some other things going on in the community. But yes, PBA Basketball Slam, which we've both, you've been putting in a bit more time, and you've and the feedback you sent through has been very gratefully accepted, and it's already starting to take effect. And some further thoughts on Dunk Lords, which we've touched on before, the PS5 and Xbox One, the situation there, and of course the PS5 pre-orders and what a mess that's been. So definitely a full show. So it's got some good stuff to talk about this week. And also want to put out there that we have reached out to our friends of the show, Josh and Dave from Namo Gamo, who of course made the fantastic basketball classics. Speaking of basketball games that we enjoy, looking to get them back on, and we're going to have I think a very fun discussion, Derek, about the hallmarks of both good and bad basketball games, and it'll be great to talk to them not only as gamers, of course, and to share those ideas and impressions from our combined years of playing basketball games, but also how it shaped their their philosophy as they made Basketball Classics. I think it's going to be a really fun show when we get them on. It's just a matter of getting all the times set up to do that and lining up all our respective schedules. But I think that's going to be a very fun discussion when we get that going together to not only reminisce about those games and talk about the good and the bad and those philosophies, but also how that shaped Basketball Classics as well. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I really enjoyed our last conversation with both of them. It's not just on the basketball gaming front. It's just that they love basketball, right? They love basketball history. They love basketball. They like the history of basketball video games as well. And, they wouldn't have put all of that classic content in Basketball Classics. I know it's called Basketball Classics, but they could have just stuck it to current teams and done the, old graphics, right?
Yeah.
To the game. But they put in all the, the different years for different teams and from different decades and all of that stuff. And I just love talking to people like that. There was a thing that I wanted to mention as well is, I know that the PBA Basketball Slam people, I believe that they've been listening to our podcast as well. I think it would be pretty cool to have someone from that team.
Sure.
Maybe come on to the show and, one of the developers or creative directors and talk to them about their game because, as we'll talk about later, I think that there's some decent bones there. And I just wanted to bring up a random thing, and this is for people who have played NBA Playgrounds 1, the original. And I don't know if you did the challenges on NBA Playgrounds 1. By far the hardest, and I know this is random, but I really wanted to bring this up, by far the hardest challenge in NBA Playgrounds, because you have to do challenges during the tournament modes, is getting 6 steals.
Yeah.
Getting 6 steals with the way the stamina works in that game. My brother and I have already tried like 10 different games to get 6 steals. We're using different players, like we're using Rick Barry and Tim Hardaway or Maurice Cheeks or Bob Cousy, and we're using these guys who have high steal ratings, and we just can't get to 6 steals.
Well, the CPU also kind of button reads and automatically reacts with an elusive move as well. Which doesn't
they're
help,
spinning. Yeah, they're
it's
spinning
kind of cheesy,
right
to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really tough. And then if you push, they don't count it as a steal. Yep. Like if you knock them over, be a steal. They don't count. Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. I love the challenges. In fact, the depth and the way the format and in the way everything else is with NBA Playgrounds 1, I prefer it over Playgrounds 2. And I love the challenges, but that one just feels impossible. So we're going to try it again tonight. But yeah, it's really tough.
It is tough. There are definitely challenges that I have not finished for every. I finished the tournament on PS4. I haven't on when I double dipped on PC. I haven't yet. But yeah, they are definitely tough because of the way the CPU is just a little bit cheesy on that on that front. But yeah, the steals ones are pretty hard. The blocks one was pretty hard originally before they did some adjustments with the patch. But I'm looking forward to you, because I know you've been playing some Jam 2010, which is not its official title. It's just NBA Jam. It's the one that came out in 2010 by EA Sports there. On Fire Edition is, I feel, one of the definitive version of Jam, apart from the originals. If there's a Jam game that stands as one of the best, or the best Jam game, or indeed one of the best arcade basketball games of all time, I do mention On Fire Edition as my pick for that title. 2010 is very solid. The original NBA Jam games and Tournament Edition, of course, back in the day, fantastic. Don't get me wrong, they're up there for me as well. But On Fire Edition is just a fantastic game. So it's I'd be interested to get your thoughts on that one. It's still available digitally. The servers aren't online anymore, so you won't get the roster updates, but you can still get the game on Xbox Live and PlayStation Network. Yeah.
So maybe I'll figure that out. I might ask you to help me out with that a little bit. Maybe send me a link or something like that.
I'll definitely do that. 'Cause it's definitely worth picking up. Yeah.
Is solid. 2010 and NBA Jam 2010, I uploaded the gameplay video. That and I want people from PBA Basketball Slam to understand the importance of like turbo. And I said they should add a turbo button to that game. But turbo is so important in that game, and it just adds a different element to the game. The shoes light up. You don't have to have that on PBA. It doesn't have to be like something like that.
Yeah.
But on NBA Jam 2010, having the differences in change of speed, being able to turbo back for blocks, etc. I just think the gameplay on NBA Jam 2010 is so well-rounded. It's fun getting blocks. It's fun shooting. I just think overall the game is very well made. But yeah, I'll see if I can get my hands on Fire Edition.
Definitely worth it. I'll definitely help you out with that. But moving on to NBA 2K21, just talking about the patch first of all. It is the first big patch. Of course, there's the day one patch that at least came through on consoles, 1.01. This is NBA 2K21 patch 1.02 or version 1.02 for the game, however you want to look at it. Patch number 2, etc. It has come through. It's the first big one, as I said. It addresses a lot of the pro stick aiming issues and tunes some of the shooting. Changed some other things with the shot aiming. Perhaps the biggest change that, and of course again you're playing on PC, so you haven't got it yet. I'm still waiting for it to come through on PC as well, as I have both PC and PS4. Shot aiming can now be used when the shot meter is off, and the speed at which the pro stick is deflected now determines where the ideal shot aiming window is. Left for a slow flick, or it's to the left on a slow flick, or it's on to the right for a fast flick. So they've changed some things with the way that's shooting. So that's new adjustments to make. So that's the selector. When you boot up the game, it'll ask you to select that, and you can then change that later in the settings. Shot aiming again with the pro stick shot aiming with the shot meter setting turned off. Ideal shot aiming, as I said, has changed. They've changed the ante-up, which is the the gambling arena. Let's just put it out there in MyCAREER to use competitive slider settings, so it's more skill-based. When shot feedback is set to off, players and opponents will no longer see excellent release green light animations. They fixed some unwanted fadeaway shots, improved standing dunk reliability when using the pro stick, disabled the double team indicator in an effort to clean up the on-screen UI based on community feedback, added the ability to shoot driving floaters further away from the basket. They've moved park dribbles. Moving park dribbles are revamped to holds on the pro stick rather than flicks. Allowed continued use of hard stops with LT or L2. Cleaned up some animation pops in the dribble move system. Fixed ball physics bugs when shot timing was set to real player percent, which neither of us use. Toned down the effectiveness of the lead basket pass features to prevent exploits. They've also fixed a few hangs and so forth in MyCAREER. And my court, in my team, again, some technical issues with hangs as well. 2K share content has been enabled, which is a big thing for PC users at the moment because it's disabled. We haven't actually touched on that, but that is an issue that is fixed by the patch, and why it's so important that the PC version gets patch 1.02 ASAP, and a couple of other technical issues as well. So there's been some gameplay adjustments, Derek, also some technical fixes as well. Once again, very important that the PC gets it so that they can have those fixes and tuning adjustments, etc., but also, again, to enable the 2K share content.
There's a couple things here. We talked about double teaming, and they didn't address this specifically. They were talking about a different portion of that. But, the double teaming and leaving people wide open under the hoop,
Yep.
A legacy issue, which has been in there. We can do it on NBA 2K17 as well. But if we turn off the adaptive coaching engine and mess around with a couple of the other defensive settings, it can turn it off. But the double teaming and leaving people wide open just after one or two shot makes with a player is kind of ridiculous.
Still
They'll
a
leave
thing,
them
yeah.
completely wide open under the basket. I also want to point something out about shooting. Here's my recommendation for people who think that the aiming in the game doesn't make sense, the mechanics of the aiming, and it doesn't feel like real shooting. Go into your controller settings and turn the aiming off. You can still have user timing. You can still have the meter on, all of that stuff. But if you think that the aiming is unrealistic, or it doesn't feel like you're really shooting, or you don't see the purpose of it, or it's mechanically flawed, my recommendation is to go into the controller settings and turn the aiming off. That way your shooting experience is better and less frustrating. So that's just something that I noticed, and I saw somebody else mention it on Twitter as well, but I just think it's a good option to be able to just turn it off. So I'm glad they included that option. That's a good thing.
It definitely is. I think there is a problem. I haven't tried it yet myself, so they may have fixed it with a hotfix. I'm not sure. But I have heard that if you turn off the shot aiming on the stick, then the new dribbling moves don't work. And that's kind of a problem if that's still the case.
I've had aiming off almost the entire time. Mm-hmm. And if you look at my videos, I have no restriction in my dribbling.
Okay, like so the new dribbling controls are still working as they're meant to?
Yeah, they are for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I've had
might have to see exactly what that's about and test it out myself. But I did hear there were some issues with changing the aiming controls to one. They might have resolved that with a patch, or it might be something else.
That would be really frustrating. Yeah, but what's funny is how the size up, how that's triggered in NBA 2K21. You have to hold it up and keep it up the whole time.
Yeah.
Try going from playing NBA 2K21 to going and playing like 2K19 or 2K18 or 2K17 or something like that.
Yeah.
Because you end up just firing up like threes that you don't plan to
Yeah.
because the stick doesn't work the same. So we threw on NBA 2K19 the other night. My first 2 plays down the floor were like jacking up heavily contested threes because I was trying to go into a size up.
I do that with 2K11, say when I'm testing out the roster, which yes is still coming. I'll be just there dribbling, and of course that has the old isomotion system where it's hold the trigger and move the left stick to perform moves. So I'll be coming up the court and just want to do a casual spin or a crossover and end up firing from 3/4 court because there's no right stick dribbling in that game. And more amusingly, the time I went back to play NBA Live 95 and was trying to do dribble moves with the right stick. Well, it does not register at all, funnily enough, because there is no dual analog controls in that game because it was before dual analog controllers. So yeah, it is when you go back to games, when the muscle memory that you've got to overcome. We talk about overcoming muscle memory to adapt to a new game, to adjust to a new game, if you will, Derek. But then when you go back again, having to unlearn that or go back to those old controls, you do end up sometimes firing those shots from beyond midcourt or doing something that you don't want to do.
No, and I think it's nice to be able to still adjust. Like I think for me, like we had 2 really, really great games on NBA 2K19, even after playing NBA 2K21. So we were able to adjust, and it's nice to be able to adjust pretty quickly. But like you said, the first couple of possessions are always, it's the same thing like playing NBA Live 2005 or 2004, and you throw up floaters from the 3-point line.
Yes.
Because because there's a separate dunk and shoot button, and you can never, when you first put it on, you can never remember which one is which. So your first couple of shots are always that. Or there's a couple different NBA Live games where you throw full court alley-oops.
I was going to say I usually remember the shot and dunk and layup button, but I forget which shoulder button is direct pass, icon pass, and which one is alley-oop. So whenever I go back to an old NBA Live game, and they moved around a couple of times as well, so whenever I go back to an old NBA Live game, inevitably I throw a very ill-advised alley-oop because I've forgotten that that's not icon pass or sprint. That is that is alley-oop, and it's not a time to throw an alley-oop.
Right, same here with me. Like for me, if you watch any of my gameplay videos, you'll see the icons constantly going on. I use icon passing all the time. I basically use icon passing on almost every possession if I can. So that happens to me too. If I go back and play those games, it's always like a full court or half court alley-oop that just sails out of bounds, and you have the receiver just awkwardly jump for it.
Yeah.
And
I tried.
There's no chance. Yeah, exactly. But no, I think that NBA 2K21 with the changes that you made, I think that a lot of what happens is they lean on patches now. And we talked about this prior. I think that they know that they can release a game and the game can have all of these issues, and then they can say, oh, well, we'll patch it. And then they'll admit to a patch. And then, they'll, we can patch this as well. And then they do another patch. And then I think it was 2 months in to NBA 2K20. I think we had 8 patches. Is that right? I think it was 8 or 9 different patches, like 2 months into NBA 2K20.
Something like that. Yeah, I'd have to look back at the update history, but it definitely was. A lot of patches came through in quick succession, and at the time, because especially on console, you're talking about 7 or 8 gigabytes of patches. On PC, at least on Steam, they do have the more efficient file size, but because they have to replace pretty much everything they do, or they used to at least, have to replace everything that they had in the previous patches, or it has to contain everything the previous patch came through, that even if they push through a hotfix, it's still 7 or 8 gigabytes at one point on PS4, which was, a lot of people were pointing out how inefficient and annoying that was.
Yeah, and I think the other aspect of it is you don't get used to the gameplay. At least, with some of the older titles and everything like that, even NBA 2K11 and whatnot, even 2K4 and 2K14 and those titles, when you got the game, you could expect mostly the same gameplay from the start of from when it was released to the end of the cycle. So you could get used to that, and you could adapt to it, and you could start seasons, and throughout the season you knew what you were getting into gameplay wise and how it was going to feel on the sticks. Now, and we've talked about this, for those people who play offline, you on release day you could have one gameplay experience, and then 2 or 3 months later you're in the middle of this season and the gameplay feels entirely different. due to patches. And I think that can get a little bit frustrating, especially if you enjoyed a previous version. For me, I back up the EXE, and there's other ways to get previous versions of the game pre-patched through like the Steam Vault and whatnot. But, it's got to be frustrating for those people who can't revert back. You know what I mean? Who can't revert back to the gameplay they can't revert back to the gameplay that they were really enjoying.
And that's a problem we had. As much as I enjoy 2K17, it's a game that I played a lot, frankly, with MyCAREER playing through the 2 seasons, or at least 1.5 seasons, playing 500 games of Pro-Am with the guys. It was a game that I definitely spent many hours with. And as much as we enjoyed that Pro-Am, it is still to date our favorite Pro-Am experience in 2K. It did feel like it was changing with some of the patches that were coming through week to week, or the tuning updates as well. Because it's not just the big patches, but it's also when you see the update required. Sometimes it's roster updates or other content updates coming through, but there's also some tuning fixes that come through. So even if you replace the exe file, at least at the time when it was coming through those tuning updates, you were still getting some updates that were affecting the online experience. And it was frustrating to feel that, last week or a couple of weeks ago, that was really good gameplay, and now we're getting this tuned update, this tuning fix in quoted commas, that doesn't really feel like an improvement. It feels like it's taken a step back, and it felt like there wasn't that consistency with the online experience in 2K17. It got a little bit better in subsequent years, but at the same time, it felt like they weren't touching things that needed to be fixed at the same time. So there's positives and negatives to the consistency. If it's consistently bad, then you kind of wish that they were changing it a little more. But at the same time, we've also had that experience online back in the day, where it did feel like a different game week to week with some of those tuning fixes, tuning updates. You used to have that consistency with older games that if you don't have, that is something I do miss about those times.
Yeah, I think it made for more memories. I remember us playing through the entire NBA 2K11, 2K12, 2K13, and 2K14 cycles, me and my brothers. And we also played through the entire NBA Live 2004, 2003, 2005 cycles as well. And I just remember us having, us all getting together and us playing the games and all us, I never was like, oh, the dribbling feels different today.
Yeah.
Oh, the shooting feels different today. Oh, wait, I can't accelerate the same way as I did before. Oh, wait, why does the post feel like this?
Why is it a completely different game than it was when I booted up last night? Yeah.
Right, exactly. So, you had that consistent experience, and we knew what we were getting into and the fun we were about to have. So it definitely matters.
And the drawback to that back in the day was there were problems that you knew that weren't going to be fixed until the next game came out. Whereas these days, sometimes those problems do get fixed, and sometimes games do get better, but then the patch comes through and it makes them worse. We've talked about that many times. NBA Live 10 is an example. NBA Live 19 is a more recent example. 2K17, as I said, went back and forth, at least in the online experience. And to your point, NBA 2K20 by November, we were up to patch 1.08. So yes, 8 updates by November. By the end of the year, December, obviously, that's how calendars work. NBA 2K20 patch 1.09. So we had 8 or 9 updates within the first 2 or 3 months of the game coming out, which is kind of excessive. And in one hand, you want them to send through hot fixes, especially if a patch messes something up, that they send through another patch as quickly as possible. But as you say, there is that dependency on, we can fix it post-release through a patch, and so the game does come out and it has to be fixed. I mean, I'd rather a day one patch that fixes issues than having no day one patch at all and having to wait months for a fix to come through, because that was a problem back in the day when there was a really big problem in the patch. We had to basically petition them for a patch, and maybe we get 1 or 2 a year. So it's better in that regard, but it's kind of gone from the extremes, from having the game that's fairly solid and consistent to having the games that are getting umpteen patches within the first couple of months. It does indicate a problem there. And I know that there are issues that you can't detect until they're out in the wild, and certainly when they change up the shooting as they have, these new mechanics this year, you never really know how it's going to play out until it gets into the hands of the consumer, which is kind of a problem in and of itself. And I know this year, again, you can't really do the community days and the pre-release testing and everything that you normally might because of the pandemic. But then again, maybe that goes to show that this probably wasn't the year to introduce new mechanics like that.
You know where where I expect patches. But by the way, 8 patches in 2 months is 1 patch per week. I just want to point that out. That averages out to 1 patch per week. That's nuts, in my opinion. But, when I expect patching like that is if a game's in early access.
Yeah.
On Steam. Or it's known that it's a beta build or whatever you want to call it. It's not... It's something that's being actively worked on. Maybe you can play it. Maybe it's something that they announce as something playable, but it's early access. That's when I expect patching like that. I don't expect patching like that after a $60 or some people $100. Yeah, AAA game. After a release. So.
No, that is the problem with patches. That they have become a bit of a crutch for developers, AAA developers, to sell a full-priced game, and one with premium economy, premium recurrent revenue mechanics on top of that, as 2K has, and then kind of using us as guinea pigs, using us to test out the game as beta testers. To do that, it's definitely a problem. Anyway, patch 1.2 has come through. It has some pretty worthwhile fixes. I'm sure it won't be the last big patch for 2K21 current gen. At the moment, it needs to be. Well, the PC version again hasn't got it, and it's and that is unfortunate. The PC version gets the same content updates as PS4 and X1 at the moment, and we've talked again about the issues with PC being an afterthought in so many respects before. But yeah, it's just unfortunate that it's not getting that patch as quickly. But to 2K's credit, it has already gone through to QA at the QA branch at Steam. It's with QA at the moment. It's just not. It hasn't been pushed through yet. But it's usually about a week. Looking back at last year's patches, occasionally the PC version got it at the same time, or a day later, or I think even once before the consoles. It's which was a very rare occurrence with PC. But it is very unfortunate that it has that it's taking so long to come through, and it's still to this day. And it may not be 2K's fault, but nevertheless, that doesn't really. It doesn't make people much happier on PC, whoever's fault it is. It's still frustrating that it's still being held up.
Right. I think with me, I've kind of accepted 2K21 for what it is at this point. Remember, like I said, I made a video that said, let's make the best of it. I have my slider tweaks. I know where the game, how to have the most fun I possibly can with the game. My brothers as well. My other brothers, we're having basketball gaming weekends again. And so my oldest brother's coming over tomorrow. We're all going to sit in front of the TV and we're going to do a fantasy draft and we're going to play some 2K21 using the sliders and everything. So we're going to make the best of it. I honestly have already backed up the EXE before this patch, just in case. So I just want to make sure that my gameplay, if the gameplay is eroded more by the patch, that I have a backup where I can still play the way it is right now. So
I need to back up my NBA 2K19 XE because because Avast twice now has flagged that as when I've tried to boot up 2K19, flagged it as a virus. So that's thank you Avast for that. Even when I've created an exception, so that was very annoying to have to.
Surprised it's not 2K18. That might be the virus.
Yeah. It's certainly the closest the 2K has come perhaps through to that. As for things they need to patch moving forward, obviously they're going to continue sending through tuning updates for the shooting. It's going to be one of those things I think that as people adjust to it and they look at the results and the learning curve and everything, they may continue to send through tuning updates. Obviously roster updates are going to come through at some point, one would imagine, when the new season, when the draft happens and the new season begins. Obviously, we're still finishing up the 2020 season as it is, but there are some very troubling issues at the moment that I've seen in the community. MyCAREER saves are being corrupted, and people are just losing their MyPlayer. The Live King mentioned an issue where his save, he basically was no longer on the NBA team in MyCAREER anymore. He would boot into the mode and he'd be locked to the point guard, but it wasn't his player, and then the save corrupted completely. That's VC spent down the drain, and again, whether you've earned that in game, whether you've got the pre-order bonuses, or whether you bought VC, it really doesn't matter. That is wasted time, effort, and money to some extent, even if you haven't bought any extra. It's you still bought the game, you still lost that time. That is something they need to definitely fix up. As you said, I think you might have returned that, but for anyone moving forward, that is something that they need to fix up. And of course, at the moment, if in MyCAREER, the daily bonuses, you don't get VC for them. That is bugged. Rock has confirmed that. A couple of other people on Twitter have confirmed that. I think Dre, Obi-Wan Watson has mentioned that as well. That it's that you don't get the daily bonus. If you do it, it'll say completed, but you don't get the VC. That is a way of grinding VC, so you don't have to pay for it. So, and this is something that really bothers me, Derek, with 2K, is that they will, I know I've brought it up many times, but it's much like the whole Pink Diamond fiasco a couple of years ago, the LeBron James Pink Diamond locker code. When there's a problem that doesn't work out in 2K's favor, but maybe works out in our favor, like a VC exploit or some kind of issue where the VC is, you get very generous earnings, they are very quick to patch that. They will even patch that on Christmas Day. But if there's an issue with VC where we're not able to earn it or we're not getting the VC earnings, they will just drag their feet on it and be very slow to fix it. And it's little things like that, I think, as much as anything else with the VC in 2K, is what has really eroded the goodwill that they've built up over the years, that they will ban people for VC exploits and patch them out of the game quick smart, but when it comes to problems with people earning VC, people getting their pre-order bonuses, still kind of some issues with that as I understand it, they're very slow to fix that. And I think that's just terrible.
Think about this. So I had mentioned this previously in a tweet. 2K20 had over 8 million downloads, right? So think about how many people are playing these games. And think about like you said, the daily rewards not coming through for VC. So those people that are not getting those, think about how many people depend on those. How many of those people are actually going to put money in the game because they just want to, accelerate their progression, right?
Yeah.
Like, how much money? Let's say that's down for how long has it been down? How long have they not been getting the daily rewards?
Since launch.
Since launch. So
as I understand
think about that. How much more money has 2K made off of people saying, you know what, F it.
Yeah.
I'm not able to progress fast enough. I'm going to put more money into the game. Think about that.
Yeah.
And for anybody who thinks that's being conspiracy or anything like that, there's proof out. There's room for us to think like this. There's reasons for us to think like this because, like you said, if it comes to a VC exploit or it comes to something where they think somebody else might be cheating the game, like a user, they get banned immediately or it gets patched or immediately. It doesn't matter which day. It just happens. Like, it gets taken care of right away. But then when it comes to something like that, like the daily rewards, it just sits out there and it's not fixed. So, like I said, just think about how many people download this game. Think about how many people get frustrated with the grind and how that obviously could benefit 2K's wallet. By people saying, you know what, F it, I'm gonna put in the money and put more money in. So I can progress fast. People do.
People actually would, and you're right. And again, you can say, oh, it's delving into conspiracy theories and everything, but Strauss-Zelnick, the 2K CEO, did say they have the recurrent revenue was down in 2K20, but they're looking at ways to increase it again to the shareholders. He said this. Well, this is a pretty good way of doing it, And again, it sounds like a conspiracy. It sounds cynical and paranoid and whatever. But the problem is, again, there isn't that goodwill. And when there's that lack of goodwill with the company, it does invite that kind of speculation, that kind of belief that maybe that they've got this history of not fixing these issues. And are they sitting down and saying, look, we're going to sit on this and not fix it because it's going to make recurrent revenue? Maybe. But the point is that you believe it, and the reason that you believe it is because their track record hasn't been good.
Yeah, exactly. And can I point something out really quick? The fact that roster sharing for PC has not been up since launch is unbelievable. That's unbelievable. We're 2 weeks into 2 weeks post-release, because it was released on September 4th. And we haven't been able to do any roster or DNA sharing throughout these 2 weeks. Why? And why has this not been patched yet? And also, why haven't I seen any posts about it? Why haven't I seen 2K acknowledge it or anything like that? I just don't understand.
Well, they don't. I mean, we've talked about EA not mentioning live, which they don't. When a live game has been out, they've usually, their communication has been pretty decent. It's been lacking while Live has had the downtime. We've talked about that at length, but they have been pretty open about acknowledging the issues. And even if you go on the NBA Live mobile Twitter, they're pretty open about maintenance and issues like that. Whereas 2K does not like delivering bad news, to the point where nobody does, because it makes people angry, and gamers are not necessarily always the most understanding bunch. I'll certainly admit to that. As a group, we can be quite toxic, and that is an issue that really we need to work on from within. But I think people do appreciate that honesty and that transparency. And I know you can go back and forth with transparency ends up hurting more than helping, but there are some issues where you should say, hey, we know this issue, we acknowledge it, we're working on it. I mean, they could still be dragging their feet behind the scenes, but that acknowledgement, I think, goes a long way. And again, to build that trust and goodwill that simply isn't there at the moment.
Yeah, it'd been great to have like an announcement on Twitter, Reddit, or wherever there, or even when a prompt in the game that says, we apologize, 2K share is down on PC. You can't, do DNA. You can't share your rosters or anything. We are working on a fix. You know what I mean?
Exactly,
like just something, even if it was like a tweet from Mike Wang or the official 2K handle that said, hey, you know what? Well, this is something that needs to be fixed. Sorry, it's down. It's stuff like that gets, goodwill. You know what I mean? That gets people saying, hey, you know what? They communicated it. We appreciate that. And you know what, there'll be a fix soon because now they've acknowledged it. But
they're not dodging the issue. They're not dodging it.
Right. It's like reading these reviews where they give the game like an 8.5 or a 9, and I'm going to use Brian Mazik for an example, and they'll give for Forbes, they'll give a review of the game, and they'll say the good, the bad, and the final, and the bottom line, and they don't touch on any of the real game issues. Like, they don't touch on the real gameplay issues. They don't talk about the player movement. Even some, like we had talked about in the last podcast, they call it basketball perfection. They don't talk about defense, the blow-bys. They don't talk about the running up the sideline for easy hoops. They don't talk about the double team intelligence. They don't talk about the speed issues. They don't talk about the shooting mechanics issues, all that stuff. But basically they'll gloss over any issues, and they'll call and then they'll give you the bottom line, right? And it's super frustrating. And I think there is a comparison between the two. I think that's marketing 101, right? That's their business. That's what they do with their, by market. That's how they market their game. And that's how they avoid talking about the issues with the game, whether it's being reviewers or 2K themselves.
Well, back in the day, I remember we used to post a lot of reviews, and I know OS did as well on the main page. IGN gives 2K whatever a 9.2 or whatever. And we'd post the reviews because they used to be more informative. I feel reviews used to be more informative back in the day, before it really became influencers and content creators became a thing. I mean, content creators were always a thing, but before it became what it is now, and it was actually worth at least seeing what some of the reviews said. It's not really worth. A lot of reviews aren't worth checking out. I do want to write an article about this. I have an article that's coming out about is 2K pay to win. I believe that's in a couple of weeks' time. I'm ahead in scheduling my articles at the moment, and it's a lot of people say, oh, it's not pay to win because you don't need to pay, and that's one of my big things, is that we get caught up on that terminology of pay to win, and we overlook the issues that the recurrent revenue mechanics are causing for the game, because we're getting say, oh, well, it's not technically pay to win. Okay, it's not technically pay to win, but it does have these issues with the VC system. And by focusing on that terminology, and then making that a stumbling block, making that a pedantic point, we gloss over those issues. And a lot of reviews do that. They don't mention online stability. They don't mention recurrent revenue mechanics and how intrusive it is. They don't mention pack odds in my team. They'll just run down the features like it's almost a glorified press release, essentially, with a few maybe personal opinions thrown in here and there. And there's some value in those personal opinions in the better reviews, I will say. But I have stopped posting reviews on the site as far as news updates. Back in the day, you'd say, oh, well, this is, the reviews are coming in and this is what they're saying. It's honestly not worth it. There are content creators that are talking about the issues, and I'll definitely say, yes, check them out, us included, and we thank you for checking out the NLSC podcast. But a lot of the professional reviews these days, they, as you say, they don't touch on those issues. They throw out things like basketball perfection or other marketing like phrases and repeating the hashtags, essentially things like that. It's very disappointing to see, and it's why I don't post the reviews anymore, because I don't think there's value in them.
The best reviews that there are the people who are not compromised doing video reviews on YouTube.
Yeah,
those are the best reviews. The ones, one of them's his name is the Lazy Peon, and he does reviews for RPGs and MMOs and whatnot. But what he'll do is he'll be going through all of the aspects of the gameplay. He's going into the menus. He's telling you about the game. He's giving you insight on the gameplay, how the controls work, what's good about it. He does a full pros and cons at the end. He does a do I recommend. It's literally just a deep dive into the game where you can see where he uses examples, etc. These reviews from IGN, from Brian Mazik, from GameSpot, from any of these sites, those reviews are incredibly, how do I say,
superficial?
they're not, I'm trying to use something other than paid for. They're very basic, casual, and agenda driven. How about that?
Sure.
Basic, casual, and agenda driven. That's what I would say.
Well, I don't think anyone gets directly paid, but I do think they are very careful about losing. They're very careful about losing access.
Yeah. They did access and their job.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. It's losing access and losing their job. So, we talked about how in NBA 2K, which game was it, 2K18 or 2K19, 2K trying to shut down that reviewer, right?
Did it, like was that 2K19 or 20? Yeah. Or no, it was 18. It was 18, yeah. It was 18.
It was 18, yeah. And they tried to shut down that reviewer. How does that look? So let's say that reviewer was Brian Mazik, and Brian Mazik worked for Forbes, and let's say NBA 2K tried to shut that down. How would that look on Brian Mazik's behalf, according to Forbes? Right?
Yeah.
Like, do you think Forbes would question him doing those articles moving forward?
I would hope
yes.
so. Yeah.
He might lose that access. Yeah, he might lose that access, and he might lose that gig. So that's the point that I'm trying to make. The best reviews are those who, they're on the ground floor, they're not compromised, and you can tell that they actually, they do a video review, they explain the ins and outs of the games, they talk about the pros and cons, and, they really give a deep dive. Those are the best reviews. And when I'm looking for video game reviews and I'm looking to see, hey, do I want to pick up this game? I go straight to YouTube and look for those.
That site was, I believe, SixAxis was the site, and they did catch a bit of heat for acquiescing to the demands of 2K and not standing by the reviewer. But at the same time, I understand it. I understand if you've got some PR person from 2K breathing down your neck, and I think Jim Sterling covered this, and he said, even if there is no actual threat of legal action or removing access or whatever, it's the implication, it's the implied threat, and he says, I think as Jim put it said it is that squeeze that's being put on there in a friendly or a falsely friendly way of, just reaching out. We're just concerned about this review, and we're concerned about this score you've given it. We're concerned it's a protest score, and fixing it on that protest score or protest review.
It's bullying.
It is plain and simple. And to that point, I would hope that if Brian Mazik posted such a review for Forbes, I would hope that Forbes would stand by him there to say, well, no, that's his opinion. If you don't like it, make a better game. But the problem is, companies do want that access, and they do want they want people who can get that access and get that in, because then they can have the first review out there, and it's not about that. It really should be about the best review and the most comprehensive review, and we really have gone away from that, unfortunately, in professional video game reviews because of the access. It's getting really.
You know what it should be. You know what it should be. Instead of make us look good, which is what 2K is, make us look good. Instead of that, it should be, we look good, talk about us. Right? That's what it should be. It shouldn't be make us look good and dodge the issues and don't talk about this because it might be looked at negatively. It's, hey, we made a great game. We look good. Talk about us. Like, that's what it should be. But it's the opposite of that nowadays. It's make us look good. Don't talk about these certain things. Highlight these certain areas. It's like a scripted interview for like a talk show, right? Like you send your You send your guest, hey, these are the questions that we're going to ask. Which ones do you want to answer? Right?
Yeah.
These are the ones that these are the only ones that we're going to give you, and you can choose which one to answer, and we'll decide which ones we accept, or something like that, or vice versa. Like that's how that feels, and I think it's not fair to the consumer, because we had talked about this on a prior show. A lot of people do look at these reviews and stuff to decide if they want to buy a game. They do. Yeah. They take these reviews seriously. So if the reviews aren't being truthful and they're hiding issues that could dramatically impact the potential consumer's enjoyment, then that's not fair.
And there are people who will parrot those reviews word for word and just stick with that, because people will follow the word of their favorite content creator or favorite reviewer.
Yeah, exactly. We've talked about that, and we've talked about the impact of them pushing for those popular YouTubes to talk about the games, and the popular YouTubers. And as we talked about, the popular YouTubers, the super popular YouTubers and influencers, what do they want to keep? They want to keep their access.
Absolutely. And I understand that. That's the thing. It's hard to... I mean, yes, you can, at the end of the day...
And their popularity, not just their access, but they want to keep their name.
And I understand, because we can say that, yes, have morals, make a stand and everything. But if that is, especially if it's your career, if you have built up your platform and your audience to a point where you are making it a career, then that access is very important. And you've got a big company breathing down your neck about these things and saying, dangling the carrot and saying, we're going to take this away if you don't play nice, if you don't couch your criticisms with a lot of praise, that almost to the point where you might as well not have said the criticisms in the first place, because everyone's going to focus on all these things, all these nice things that you've said that you've presented in a way that almost outweighs the bad, no matter how bad it is. I get it, and I've written about this before in Monday Tip-Off about the influences on the virtual hardwood. I get it, and I get when you're flown in and they treat you real nice and everything, and how it can influence your opinion as much as you're trying not to let it not to. You don't want to burn those bridges, and I get it. And again, I think it's one of those reasons why I really admire what Flight did when Ronnie tried to reach out to him, and he basically said, "No, you called me a bully and has been bad mouthing me. Take your influencer job and shove it."
Yeah, I was really proud of him, actually. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I was proud of him.
No, I get it, yeah.
And I think a lot of people were, and I think that actually grew people's respect for him. I do want to point out, too, this is the last thing I'm going to say about the Mazik article, how he said, the good, the bad, and the bottom line, which is kind of insulting to me, in my opinion, because I did a demo impressions gameplay that was 100 times more detailed and accurate than what his review was on the after release, and I called it the good, the bad, and the ugly. Mm-hmm. So it's like, yeah, whatever. His review literally should have been called cherry picked good, cherry picked bad, cherry picked bottom line. That's the way I would call it. That should be the new name of the article. And sorry if I'm coming off negative, but if you read that article that he put out, he highlighted hardly any real issues with the game. How can you give me a bottom line and a final bottom line and a final verdict and all of that stuff when you don't highlight hardly anything with the game? I just get frustrated with that, I'm going to be honest with you.
The remark in that article that kind of rubbed me the wrong way was calling the 2K community spoiled, which I understand where he was coming from on that one, but at the same time it felt like it was very dismissive of any criticism at the same time.
No, it's apologist. The thing is these reviewers do this too. They say, some say this is 2K 20.5, but, and then they'll add like some BS paragraph about it that doesn't really talk about any of the good and bad really with the game. It's just something like an apologetic paragraph to make 2K look good. And you can see what they're doing, but some people can't. And it's just, it's frustrating.
So I've mentioned a couple of articles that are coming out. Once again, I do want to touch on that, whether 2K is pay to win and how people get caught up on that and hung up on that that terminology, and the fact that it isn't a perfect representation of it, and how I think we should move on from pay to win to more accurate terminology that actually describes those issues. And another article that's coming out next week is about inaccuracies with the rosters. The state of official rosters is the title of that article. Monday tip-off. Well, it's actually coming out tomorrow when this is recorded, so look out for that. But that has become more and more of an issue, and we've touched about this on this before. You've put out a Twitter thread, a couple of Twitter threads, which I've linked to in that article that will be coming out. Actually, might have to add that second one that you've recently posted after I drafted and scheduled the article, edited and scheduled the article rather. But we have seen more and more after the whole NBA 2K16. We had the whole Hall of Fame rating scale, which I really liked that idea, and I thought it was a good direction for the rosters to do. They've backed off completely from that. We've just got some ratings that are completely ridiculous, completely unrealistic, and there's a lot of behind-the-scenes politics, it feels, to appease players and to push narratives as far as players are concerned and to fudge ratings here and there. And it's really coming at the expense of accuracy, whether it's individual attributes, whether it's tendencies, whether it's badges, things like that. We've seen how it affects my team with the souped-up OP cards. But it's even the default rosters, which we can at least change ourselves, and we can share them, usually, when the sharing facilities are working. But we are seeing those inaccuracies with the rosters, and a copy and paste with some of the historical players. We've got new rookies coming in that are bench warmers that have got higher ratings than key historical players on the retro teams. There's just that lack of attention to detail in recent years, where it's just becoming that was the thing that 2K was known for, was just this. And I'm never saying that all their rosters have always been 100% accurate. It's easier said than done, especially if you've only got a couple of people working on them. We've seen that with. I can speak from experience of making unofficial rosters. It's you lose track of players. You can make mistakes. You can make oversights. It's a thing, but the approach just doesn't seem to have that same attention to detail and attention to realism and everything. And you pointed out for example, some mid-range ratings that are just absolutely ridiculous based on stats. And considering how much we all love stats these days, it's even more ridiculous.
I just want to know what the roster team is doing. They have a specific team that works on these rosters, right? They have stuff they can carry over from previous games. They're working off Excel spreadsheets. Possibly they can go in and edit these things. What are they doing? It's so frustrating to look at it. Like I've talked about before, the Blake Griffin copy and paste signatures to Billy Cunningham, all of them, his shooting form, everything, dunk package, all of that. You have copy and paste jobs throughout the roster. You have unbelievably inaccurate, obviously agenda-driven ratings and whatnot that make absolutely no sense. LeBron, in 12-13 for the Heat, shot roughly 40% overall, 40%. And actually, combining both, I think is probably around 38% from mid-range. And he's listed as, I want to say, an 87 for a 2K rating on mid-range for that percentage. For 15-16, he shot under 40%, I want to say, for mid-range as well for the season, from 10 to 16 and 16 to 22 feet. And he's rated a 91 from mid-range. You can't tell me that the person that did those ratings knew about basketball, number one, or if they knew about basketball, that it wasn't agenda-driven, politically driven, because it's LeBron. For the 06-07 Cavs, he has an 82, which is a high rating. That's like a B+ or a B. An 82 on mid-range, and he shot like 35% from 10 to 22 feet overall. And then if you look at Michael Jordan, the 85-86 Jordan, he's a 75 on mid-range. Michael Jordan was destroying teams for mid-range. When he first came into the league, he was an unbelievable mid-range shooter. He got better later, but he was already an amazing mid-range shooter. There isn't a point in LeBron James' career that he is better than Jordan in any way from mid-range shooting the ball. But why is this happening? Russell Westbrook on the 11-12 Thunder has an 88 rating on mid-range. Kobe Bryant in 97-98 has an 80 on mid-range. And if you go through some of these, there's just some unbelievable things. Charles Oakley has a 75 three-point shot tendency. 75 on three-point shot tendency. It's insane. Bob Lanier has a 25 on speed. Do you know what 25 on speed looks like in NBA 2K?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
I mean, it's absolutely the slowest thing in the world. Larry Bird has a 55 on overall speed. He can't even make it from baseline to baseline without. He's struggling mightily. He's running in slow motion from baseline to baseline. The speed with ball, the acceleration, the speed in general, the tendencies are completely off. What are they doing? The signatures are unbelievably bad. Like go and use some of those all-time teams and some of the classic teams and shoot with these players. Their forms aren't even close to what they are in real life. It looks like they didn't even touch them.
No.
So I have a right to be frustrated.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like,
I think
it's a AAA title, Andrew. Like, it's a AAA title. They have a roster team. They have people that should be working on this and trying to make it accurate and represent these players the way they should be. It's disrespectful. It's just not right.
It's something, again, that it feels like they paid more attention to, not to say that they were perfect over the years, but there was more attention to detail. They had the Hall of Fame rating scale. Now you've got, I think in 2K20, Matisse Thybulle was 97 in steals. He had one of the highest steal ratings in the game, ahead of some of the all-time great pickpockets in the league. You had Kevin Love and Jared Dudley had higher mid-range ratings than 98 Jordan. So
let me bring this up too. Giannis Antetokounmpo, Greek freak, 84 on mid-range rating, 84 on the regular Bucks, 75 for Michael Jordan.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, and it's
listen. That's not okay. That's like that's what about the perception, right? What about the disrespect and also the perception? And what does this teach kids? Like, we talked about this. We grew up on basketball cards, right?
Yeah.
We grew up on watching the game, basketball cards, all of this stuff, and on basketball video games and everything. But, what is, the kids knew bad. Like, people don't collect the way they used to. You know what people do instead of collecting basketball cards and learning about the players and watching them on TV? They're playing NBA 2K. So what is this?
Collecting my team cards. Alex Caruso,
right,
Galaxy Opal.
Team. Right, exactly. They're shooting threes with Yao Ming and crossing over people like he's Steph Curry. The point is that what is this teaching kids? How is this okay? And by the way, why are there not bigger lights shined on these issues?
I think it's because people, I think, have gravitated towards MyCAREER, so it's more about getting your player up and your perfect build for online, as opposed to the accuracy of the NBA side of things. There's been a real demographic shift, I believe.
Right, and I might, people that are listening to this and are like, boy, why is it worth getting this upset over? Why is he so upset? Because it matters. Because it absolutely matters. It's disrespectful to the players. Some of the current players too, who we've talked about, who are underrated in favor of players like LeBron, who are overrated in those areas. It's not fair to them either. It's almost like we talk about how the media is unfair to Anthony Davis, right? They won't even talk about him. Like he's talked about less than, like I said on a post, like Chris Gatling in 93, 94. He's just like this player that's in the league and nobody's acknowledging his big performances. So it's not fair to some of the current players what happens too with the media or in video games. But again, it's it does matter. It also impacts the gameplay. You and I have talked about this. Tendencies impact the gameplay. The way they shoot impacts the gameplay. So the signature shot choices, the attention to detail on signatures in general, dribble packages, all of that stuff. The attributes like ball handling, speed, acceleration. Look at the game we played online. None of your Bulls playing the way they do in real life. None of them. You couldn't use them the right way. They were absolutely. It was absolutely ridiculous. So again, it impacts gameplay and feel and fun too. So anyway, that's my rant about the roster stuff. And I have a million examples. So there's no I'm sorry. I'm going to say this to everybody. There's no arguing with me on this. Like
you look at a lot of the key role players that are in the 80s, rated overall in the 80s, which look, overall ratings are problematic. Nobody knows that more than people who've been playing games for years and especially people who've been making rosters, as you and I have. We know that the overall ratings, their importance gets overinflated. They are a selling point as much as anything else. And that is kind of the problem, is that you've got all these role players that they want to push out and they didn't do it this year with 2K21, at least current gen. I'm sure next gen they will. But they didn't push out the overall ratings, especially because they're probably pretty much the same as last year's rosters anyway. So it's kind of a moot point at the moment because of the whole situation with 2K21. but they often do. Part of the previous season has been to push out those screenshots with the overall ratings for the rookies and everything. And again, of course, they haven't been able to do that yet. And they'll give everyone ratings that are pretty generous from the overall, because they don't want to offend anyone. They don't want to make anyone look bad. But it's kind of like, well, you're a fairly raw rookie who's unproven at that level, and not you're kind of the 15th pick of the draft, and not, there's a reason you fell that low. You shouldn't be over 80 overall. You probably should be in the low 70s, or depending on if you are a bit underrated in the draft position or whatever. And it's moved away from that there's really inflated ratings so that, I don't know, that the players don't feel bad or whatever. But the point is, it has to be based in. They talk about that balance between fun and realism and everything. That's gameplay tuning. You've got to start from that realistic base. If you are a sim game, you need the ratings to be accurate, and from there you have sliders and tuning updates and whatever to make the gameplay how you will. But it's all relative. It's all relative to how you play.
It's not even just. It's not just elite. It's not like the whole, hey, we just want to make their overall ratings higher. It's literally copy and paste jobs.
We're
talking about.
There's definitely lack of attention to detail.
We're talking about laziness, lack of effort, lack of caring, lack of priority, all of that stuff. And I also want to point out, I'm just going to say this again. This is why I absolutely cringe. Part of the reason why, we've talked about this before, I absolutely cringe, and it makes me want to jump off my balcony every time I see this. The elitism, the sim nation, all of that stuff, all of the, this game is basketball perfection, or this is the way basketball, it plays a great game of basketball, and all of this BS sim nation elitism stuff. Listen, I'm going to be completely honest with you. None of that is realistic. None of that is sim basketball. None of it. And again, I'm coming off a little bit negative on this podcast, and I want people to understand, though, that this has been going on for a while, and nobody talks about it.
They don't. And it's part of sim. As much as skill gaps and shooting mechanics, it's part of sim that the rosters are accurate.
Right, exactly, because it impacts how they play on the floor, just like you couldn't accelerate at all with Derrick Rose. It's all part of that, like we talk about it, we talk about the gameplay issues that get in the way of it. We talk about all the frustrations and all the lack of control that you have on the floor. That's not SimNation. That's not that doesn't preach skill gap or anything like that. We talk about the heavy emphasis on badges, right? And artificial boosts to your players. That's not a skill gap. That's not simulation. That's not SimNation. That's a boost.
That's min-maxing.
We talk. Right, exactly. We talk about, they talk about elitism and SimNation, but the ratings, attributes, tendencies, signatures, all of that stuff just doesn't support it. It's not realistic. It's artificial. It's not accurately done. So again, I don't want to hear it. The get good, the get in the gym, and you guys just aren't good at the game, and all of this stuff. It's just wearing on me. Think about how many years we've gone through this. And by the way, it's only been elevated since 2K18. Like these last 3 or 4 years of this stuff has been unbelievably elevated.
The bloom is off the rose for sure. It's that's for sure. But you can check out the article that's coming out this coming week. I'm sure we'll have more to say on it, both historically, accuracy, and also the current. As Derek said, it comes down to the current players as well have those problems. And yes, we can fix them ourselves, but the thing is that takes a long time. People do want to pick up and play the game, which is only natural, which is only reasonable. So have to fix these issues, and of course, then if you can't share the rosters when the rosters sharing has been down, it makes it hard to fix it for the community.
Yeah, it's just a lot of work, and they shouldn't have. And by the way, we talked about this. It's just same with using sliders.
Work to play.
How many people are going in there to fix all of these issues? Just like sliders, how many people are going in and using sliders? Not many. The majority of there's only 4 or 5 game of slider threads, by the way, on Operation Sports, and actually I think only 2 or 3 for NBA 2K21, and we only have mine on the NLSC. The large majority, over 95% of gamers, do not make slider adjustments. Right?
Yep.
They just go in and play the game. Over 90 to 95% of gamers do not go in and do roster edits. They go in and they play the game. So it is not fair to use that as a crutch. They
No.
shouldn't have to. The game has to be good, solid by default. People shouldn't have to go in and adjust all of these things. They shouldn't have to try to do all of these external stuff to try to make the game more fun for themselves, spend hours upon hours. And you know this. In order to fix these, it's hours and days and weeks in order to do it the right way. So no, you can't use that. There is no just go mess with the sliders. There is no, well, why don't you edit them yourself? That's not the point. And it's not fair to, again, the 90 to 95% of gamers, probably higher, probably 99% of the gamers that don't mess with those things.
And of course, as we've said before, some modes you can't use custom rosters or custom sliders, making it a moot point anyway.
Right, exactly. My team, online connected modes, all of that stuff. And the other point is, hey, you know what? For PC, people want, even if somebody wanted to download a roster that maybe had some of those updates and everything, they haven't been able to.
Yeah.
Roster shares been down since launch. So there's just a lot of things that are super frustrating. And I'm going to go back to say this again, and I stand by this. I said this on, I think it was last podcast or the previous one. Sure, the games now have more animations and whatnot. But if you're not having more fun than frustration with the game, like between the lines gameplay and all of that stuff, then the game, you can't technically say that the game is better for you than a game like Live 2004 or NBA 2K10 or NBA 2K11 or 2K13. You can't say that the games got better if they're causing you more frustration. More bells and whistles and more like animations and whatnot do not automatically make a game superior to a prior game. That's the point.
But there's a new beach neighborhood. That's all we needed, right?
Right. You go, oh, yeah, there's a new neighborhood, and now you can cross over and shoot threes with Shaq and my team. Makes it a better game. So
it is that way. There's technological advancement, and there's also advancement of the experience on the sticks and how fun it is, and people actually enjoying the game. And we've talked about people buying out of desire for a new game and having the only option available to them, and why it's so important for competition. And I'm sure we'll circle back to that in due course. And look, these are the things that we have to give feedback about, and why we shouldn't shut down feedback from each other. And this is something that we've talked about as well, obviously, many times, and we'll continue to not harp on, but certainly to bring up, because it is important to realize that constructive feedback is and should be welcome. And moving on and shifting gears here, we've seen, at least certainly with the smaller developers, indie developers making basketball games. And again, we shout out to Josh and Dave and with Nemo Gamer on Basketball Classics, but also it's the games that we'll be talking about momentarily. Has been that acceptance of the feedback and that desire to make that to have that great experience, that great virtual basketball experience. And of course, one of the issues, as to really transition into what we're going to be talking about with these other games, such as PBA Basketball Slam and Dunk Lords and whatnot, is that with that smaller studio, with the independent developers, look, I'm not anti AAA gaming. Obviously, I cover AAA games, AAA basketball games on the site. I play a lot of games that are AAA games, Fallout, etc., Grand Theft Auto, Mortal Kombat, as many that you could name, all those big series. But one of the things with the indie developers is that there is that connection, sometimes for better or worse, with the with the community, with that group of gamers, with their audience. There is that desire to make the best experience possible, to take the feedback and to put it to good use. With the big AAA games, I think the developers want to do that, but they also answer to many masters. They answer to the people who want to implement recurrent revenue mechanics and use the games as a way of bleeding customers for recurrent revenue and so forth. And the suits don't care how it's done. They don't care about maybe there's some executives that care about a realistic basketball game or a fun basketball game. I think at the end of the day, most of them just care about pleasing the shareholders and filling their own pockets. Sounds cynical, but I think we can say that with some degree of confidence, to say the least. So, and that is the problem with AAA gaming. They're answering to the higher-ups, to the suits, whereas with the indie developers, you do have that, I don't want to use words like purity or whatever, but you do have that old-school mentality, I guess, of simply wanting to make and sell a good game, and to listen when people have feedback.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Sorry for interrupting. I just want to bring something up really quick that I mentioned on Twitter as well. Listen, I understand that I have a couple people that follow me that work closely with 2K. I also understand that I have a couple people that follow me who used to work recently for 2K. What do you guys want? Do you want somebody to cut corners on feedback? Do you guys want somebody to not give you exactly how they feel about the game? Like, is that what you want? Do you want just everything to be roses? Do you want to look through everything with rose-colored glasses? I want to point something out. I understand that it's probably tough to hear this stuff, especially for people who have worked on the game. But you need to look at things realistically, and you need to look at the feedback that's being given. And if somebody can give you examples of the issues with the game and they can demonstrate it on video and they can articulate it the correct way, you should listen to those people. I'm sorry. It's I don't care if you're a AAA title, and I don't care if it makes me sound like I'm hating, or if it's like, oh, this guy's super negative or anything like that. What do you want me to do? Do you want me to lie? Or do you want me to cut corners, or do you want the real feedback? So I just wanted to add that in because it sounds like I'm coming off as super negative, but the issues that I'm talking about are actual issues.
Well, I think if somebody...
I'm not making this stuff up.
No. And if somebody is... Somebody who, like us, is a passionate basketball gamer, an experienced basketball gamer, is feeling negative, you have to look at, well, why? They're not hating, they don't hate basketball games, they don't not know what they're talking about, although that's often how it's framed when you talk about if somebody frames you as a hater. It's, not you specifically, but anyone. If you're looking at, so why is the core audience not happy? And it's blaming them, they're not good enough, or they don't want a skill gap, or they're spoiled, or whatever. No, it's because they do know their product, they do know their hobby, and they're not happy with it. And it's to blame the audience and to say that it's their fault for not enjoying your product, I think is simply bad business and bad creatively as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely, 100%. But anyway, I just wanted to get that point across, and I agree with with PBA Basketball Slam. It was so refreshing to just be able to.
Yeah, let's change gears. We do have some good stuff to talk about this week. Absolutely.
Yeah. So with PBA Basketball Slam, I left a incredibly detailed review of the gameplay on Steam. I think I mentioned this last show that said, hey, listen. This game doesn't feel like arcade basketball. It's not fun. It's not fast. It doesn't have jump passing. The players move too slow. There's too many interruptions in the gameplay. You can't block dunks. All of this stuff, and I left this detailed feedback. I also made lists at the end of pros and cons, what I liked, what I didn't like. And the developers responded to me and said, wow, thank you for that feedback. We're going to start, we're going to work on the game. And then 2 weeks later, so just a couple days ago, they put through a patch. And following putting through the patch, they left a message on my review and said, hi, we just wanted to let you know that we implemented a good portion of your list. Thank you so much for the feedback and all of that stuff. And they literally implemented, and you played it, so we can talk about this in a second. They literally implemented over half of my list already in 2 weeks. They included jump passing off of shots and dunks and layups, which adds a whole new element to it. You got to have jump passing in a basketball game.
Yeah.
You have to.
Sim or arcade.
Especially arcade. Yeah, sim or arcade, but especially arcade. They implemented faster movement speed for the players. They implemented boosting off of crossovers and spin moves. They implemented the ability to block dunks, but it's not exaggerated, where you can still get dunked on. You have to time it right. They eliminated the constant celebration interruptions, which were bogging down the gameplay. They moved the speed between making a basket and inbounding the ball is now the way it should be. It's correct. And then they sent a message and they said, we're also working on the rest of your list, and we wanted to let you know we're working on the rest of your list. Now, you played PBA Basketball Slam when it first was released, so before the patch and after the patch. You can't tell me that there isn't a huge difference. Like, I've played about 4 or 5 games now, post-patch, and the game is just so much more enjoyable right now.
I mean, I could tell you that, but I would be lying, quite frankly. It's no, and shout out to the guys for obviously taking that feedback on board, that because you did have that great feedback there, for them being so gracious about it. They've followed both of us on Twitter and have mentioned, complimented the podcast and thanked us for our remarks, and we thank you for your kind remarks as well, and again for taking these Derek's feedback on board. And yes, you do feel it. I mean, the first time I played it, I did feel that, and again, it's early access and minimal, like $5 Australian, so I wasn't angry, but I could see like, this is definitely not where it needs to be compared to maybe other early access games, and certainly it's unfair to compare it especially in early access, to the classics of arcade games. But at the same time, it's like, well, you want to aim for that. I mean, shoot for the moon, you'll end up among the stars, kind of thing. That first time, it was rough, and everything that you pointed out as far as the delays of the too many celebrations and the speed and not being able to jump pass out of the shot and things like that, absolutely was the feedback I think they wanted to hear and needed to hear. And yes, having implemented it, I played that game, or just a little bit of a game actually, because we were just about to start recording, and I wanted to make sure that I'd got some experience on the sticks before we came on to talk about it. And it feels like a very different game. It feels a lot more, and you can say, okay, this is definitely on the right track. When I first played that game, it was, okay, I can see the potential, there's a lot of good things here. If they go in that right direction, this can be a very fun game. But at the moment, it's definitely not. It's missing some core aspects, as you pointed out in the previous show and just then as well, very quickly. Playing it now, it's like, okay, yes, not only does it have potential, but it's on the right track to fulfill that potential. And I think once that does get fleshed out and they can work that out, add a turbo button. I think, as you said, adding an alley-oop button is important as well. And just continuing to refine that experience and maybe polishing up some other aspects as well as far as the aesthetics, but certainly getting that on the sticks, because you can overlook some quirky stuff with the graphics. Although we talked about that with the faces. Feel like there needs to be a bit more of the faces moving around in that NBA Jam 2010 on Fire Edition style. But no, that is actually it's starting to come together already, and it's great that they were to push through that patch so quickly to take that feedback on board. So very impressed that they do that, and it's refreshing again after we've had developers. And people call us spoiled or get good and everything, to say, and yes, this is early access, so it's a bit different to a AAA title, but to come from some of the arrogance that we've seen to that very grateful accepting of feedback and looking to implement it and taking it in such a good direction, then I think we have to give that gratitude right back, because they have taken that game in that right direction. And again, it still has potential, has a long way to go, but you can see it fulfilling that potential now, and that's the important thing.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things with this. I think that once they put through a couple more patches, I think that it can be a very fun arcade game. I was already having some fun with it, but I want to point out that once they fulfill the game's depth, like there's a campaign mode that's locked right now because they still haven't finished it, and they also are going to have online play. That I think this is going to be a fun game where I'm going to want to get on and ask you to play. You know what I mean? Like maybe we can get some online games going on it.
And here's the thing: I'm not that familiar with PBA, with the players and whatnot. I know there's a few former NBA players there.
Right, so it's kind of neat because you get to get exposure to those players, and you get to get exposure to those teams.
It's not even banking on a license that I know. So it's not just saying, oh, well, this is an NBA game, the players, whatever, here you go, and it's trying to be carried by the license. I mean, obviously, it does appeal to people who know PBA, and basketball is huge in the Philippines. We have a lot of people from the Philippines in our community over the years, which is... And the sport is huge there, without a doubt. So it's great to have that PBA game for them as well, and for us, not having as much familiarity with it. It's good that we get to learn about another league, and that we can kind of have that experience of just enjoying virtual basketball like that, and then learning about the players and learning about the league. So it's not even something that we can say, that you and I can say, oh well, it's we're not nitpicking this. We're not saying that the license is. The license isn't carrying the game, is what I'm trying to get at. for us.
$5 for $5 for that much depth when it's full, when it's fully implemented. $5 for a fun, loose arcade experience. Yeah, like that. The price point too.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
So
It's worth getting on the ground floor.
Yeah, it's absolutely great, for that. And the other point too I want to make, just for last feedback, because I know that you guys are listening to the podcast, is the alley-oop button, which I mentioned in a comment to your channel, is, the ability to be able to, if you're playing co-op, to be off the ball and just hold Y and allow yourself to jump for an alley-oop, and then the person you're playing would be able to pass it to him for a dunk. That would be a huge addition. Or the ability to throw an alley-oop and make sure that you adjust it so it's not overpowering or the success rate isn't too high. But the ability to just, tap the button or hold the button down to throw an alley-oop during the game, even if you're playing solo, that would be a huge thing. So the cool thing is that I know you guys will implement the feedback, or at least try it or look into it. So it makes me feel motivated to give more. So those are just some things that I would do, and obviously the turbo button. But yeah, I have a strong outlook on it, and I want to say also great job with the soundtrack. I like the soundtrack. I liked how it's so upbeat during the game. It's immersive. I like how the tunes change while you're playing, etc. So again, nice job with that as well.
It's definitely got that right atmosphere, I think, for an arcade game. And as you said, the blocks feel a lot better. It's not overpowering either way. You can tell the difference that it's now that if you time it right, you are rewarded, and that's a very big thing. And I'm sure we'll get into that when we're talking to Josh and Dave about the ins and outs of what makes the good games and bad games, or the hallmarks of good and bad games alike. Because obviously some of these things do cross over. There are good games with bad points and bad games with good points. But it certainly does have that better feel on blocking. The speed is better, shooting and whatnot, and it will get. I can see it definitely getting better. As far as the alley-oop is concerned, it is definitely important, I think, these days. It wasn't a thing back in the day with arcade games that are really old, but after a while, when you do add that alley-oop mechanic, it is important to be able to go up for one and get that pass, whether it is, as you say, holding a button, or whether it's simply turboing towards the hoop and pressing shoot, so then forces that it triggers the jump to go up for the alley-oop. There's a couple of ways of doing that, but it is very important to be able to, when you have the CPU drone, when you have the CPU player, to be able to command them, just like in the NBA Jam games, in Street, in Playgrounds, to be able to command a CPU player to go up for an alley-oop. It's just very important, and that's where that unused button, as you say, the Y button, or triangle, or whatever, depending on the platform and whatnot, and what control you're using. That's how I would definitely utilize it. Either that, or again, for the user manually triggering a jump for an alley-oop, once you have that turbo control, turboing towards the hoop and pressing shoot. There's a couple of different ways of doing it, but it is important to get it in there one way or the other.
Right. I mean, you can tell that it was formerly a mobile game because they're not using the right stick at all. Right. Yeah. The way the game was programmed, they're not using the right stick, and that's another avenue they could think about using into the game. They could utilize the right stick. It doesn't need it. I understand the simple dribble buttons. You don't have a lot of different dribble animations in the game, and I guess the dribble button works for what it is. But the right stick is not being used right now, so that's just another avenue that you could think about to add some functionality in there if you want, depending on how deep you want your gameplay to be. You and I talked about
shoulder buttons as well.
Yeah, shoulder buttons. Yeah, one of them should be used for the turbo, as we talked about, preferably the right. But at the same time, sometimes it's those loose games, right? The games that aren't overly complicated, the ones that you're flying up and down the court and it's just crazy action and it's just a lot of fun. Sometimes those are the most fun games. So I'm not saying they have to get absolutely crazy in depth with the gameplay and all the changes and stuff like that. I think there's some basics that should be there. But hey, if the gameplay's fun, that's what matters. So
there's something to be said for complexity, and there's something to be said for simplicity. And it's not, neither is wrong depending on the genre, depending on the approach. To refer to TV tropes and its mantra, tropes are neither good nor bad. They are tools, and you can have that really complex experience. It's usually more of a sim game thing to have that really complex, deep controls. Arcade is by design at least supposed to be very, very straightforward and pick up and play. But yeah, as long as you're doing the simplicity and complexity of it well, as long as it's well executed, then it will work out.
Yeah, exactly. Also, I gotta check to see if that game's moddable. I gotta go into the files and see if I can
That's right.
see if you can like put different faces on there and players and stuff like that.
You're gonna make NBA Basketball Slam after all
But
that.
hey, you never know. Hey, you never know. And that might actually be kind of fun, right? To jump in there and mod the game and whatnot. Look, see if we can find the jerseys and the logos. Maybe there is a way that we could do it. And especially if the game's fun, I think we could make it a pretty cool thing. But again, I like learning about the PBA and the players and all of that stuff. So it's kind of neat to see a new league and all the venues. Good job with the venues, by the way, developers as well. I think there's about 5 or 6 different ones you can choose, and I like the outdoor street courts and whatnot. Even the commentary is just kind of fun.
I was going to say, I mean, obviously, Jams is always going to set the tone with Tim Kitzrow. It's a very high bar to clear, but you can't put that bar on every single game out there. And I think it's good commentary. It's a good tone. I like it more than Playgrounds, the commentary, quite frankly. And yeah, I think it does strike that right tone of fun and silly, but also at the same time encouraging and just hyping you up, and that's what it should be in an arcade game like that.
Right,
I think they've got the right tone. I like the delivery and everything. It's a good job with commentary. I have to give props there as well.
We were talking about gameplay and simplicity and stuff, and I think Dunk Lords can go in the other way. And I think I think Dunk Lords is the type of game that you need to be playing with another human, and I think that in order to truly really get the most out of it. And it has, all the power-ups in between quarters. It has the signature skills in the game. I think that for some people it's over the top. For my brother and I, it's not. We just had an absolute blast. A large reason to that is playing co-op. But if you actually look at Dunk Lords, it's an entirely different concept than PBA Basketball Slam. PBA Basketball Slam is very much in the NBA Jam element. Like if you had to go, it's way more comparable to NBA Jam with the art style and the gameplay, etc. Dunk Lords is like a combination of NBA Jam, NBA Playgrounds, Bill Lambert's Combat Basketball. It's this combination of all of these games, and I can see why some people would say it's over the top. I think it's a really nice change of pace.
Well, I'm more in the camp at the moment of saying it's a bit too much for me, and it's a bit too frenetic, a bit too complex. Whereas I do like the simplicity in the arcade style of more like a Jam or a Street or a Playgrounds.
Yeah, I think part of the thing with Dunk Lords is you have to go into it not expecting NBA Jam.
Oh yeah,
and I know that's hard for people to do because you're using 2 players and it's 2-on-2 full court. So I think that's one of the things. But I encourage you to give it a little bit more time. I wish there was a way that maybe we could through like Steam Share or something like that. I wish there was a way we could play together. I think that the campaign mode is incredibly fun. And all the different challenges it poses, all the different rules between games. You have to. There's games where there's later in the campaign where you can't see your opponents for seconds at a time, and then they appear, and then you can't see them, and then they appear, or the lights go off and then they turn on, etc. And there's just these really cool, neat concepts and elements that were put in that enhance the experience.
See, I should point out, and I said this before when we first talked about the game, is that I look at that, and while I can see that as perhaps not being what I would like out of the game, and it's again, I will continue to give the game a chance and see if I warm up to it. But I can recognize that as a fun idea, as a cool concept, and I think that is very important as we evaluate games to realize that something that we don't like may be a personal preference. Not always. We may be able to make a fairly objective observation of games and whatnot and put it out there, but certainly it does come down to if the concept is for you or not. And I've been thinking about it a little bit, and part of it is entering the game looking at it like expecting a Jam clone and getting something very different. But I think I looked at it and I've been thinking about it. You noted the power-ups, right, between all the quarters?
Yes.
Yep. I think one of the things that maybe turns me off that, because I think that, in theory, I think that's a really good idea, and it's fun, and it really works for the concept of the game. I think and it's funny because it may sound like apples and oranges, but I've been playing MyCAREER a lot over the past 6-7 years in NBA 2K, and a lot of that, especially the last few years, has really relied on min-maxing, on picking the right badges, the right builds, building a player in a certain way and picking that kind of stuff, that I'm perhaps over that complexity and wanting to pick the right things and have that almost the mini game of power-ups, even though it's different to what 2K is doing, obviously, although then you talk about the takeover meter, maybe not so much. But I think I've gotten so over the idea of having to build and create this player and be able to min-max and have the right build and have the right attributes and the right badges and everything, that I just kind of want to play basketball. And so to have that again in that frenetic, I should say, atmosphere of Dunk Lords, maybe I think that's part of why it's overwhelming me so much, that I'm craving that simplicity after having to deal with all the all the build BS of MyCAREER.
It could be that, but I think what happens is, and again, it's
part, I think it's part of it. Not all of it.
I'm playing with my brother.
Yeah,
right?
all that
I'm
too.
playing with
yeah.
my. So I think one of the things is when you're actually competing, especially if you're in the campaign mode and you're down by 7 or something like that, and you have a upgrade available to have 3 points for every dunk or something like that, it adds an element of versatility to the game. And I don't look at arcade games the way a sim basketball game is supposed to look.
Oh,
right?
sure.
Like, I don't look at them the same. Like, I'm not playing Looney Tunes basketball and comparing it to NBA 2K. So I think, and I understand exactly where you're coming from, though, because it almost feels like an artificial boost or advantage or something like that. But I think it gets different when you're playing an arcade game like Dunk Lords. And I also think it gets different when you're playing the way you're playing. Like, for my brother and I, when we're playing through the campaign and we've lost like 6 or 7 different times in a row, and the cat jumps on the ball and he's rolling over us and we're losing the ball constantly and we can't seem to score and all of that stuff, those power-ups where we can create a shield or something like that, or have an inbound shield where we can't get knocked over and everything, adds a different element to the game and leads us into a quarter and we have hope, right?
Yeah.
So I think it depends a lot on how you're playing. And again, it's not for everybody because, some people, we've talked about this, some people might enjoy the less frenetic approach. Like, we talked about PBA Basketball Slam compared to NBA Jam. Like, in my opinion, the way you play, because you're playing locally one player, I think that at the end of the day, you're going to prefer PBA Basketball Slam over Dunk Lords.
I think so too. Yeah, I think it's also that the less variables, I think, is a factor. Playing alone is a factor. I would like to try playing it local co-op to see how that goes. It certainly might change my opinion somewhat. I think it does come out because I'll have to admit, I'm not a big fan of in NBA Playgrounds the extra point for the perfect release and the first bucket.
It's random too. It feels very random, the perfect release thing on Playgrounds.
It does. I mean, that is definitely a problem with Playgrounds. But I don't like it personally, but I'm not going to say it's a bad thing because I think it is something that sets Playgrounds apart, just as Dunk Lord's concept sets it apart. So I'm not going to say it's objectively bad, but I will say that perhaps with my history of gaming, with my personal tastes, that it may not be for me. But at the same time, it is, I think, a very intriguing game. I can see the positives. Now, I think maybe that's where some of my frustration is that I feel like maybe I could enjoy the game, or I think it's a good game, So that's maybe the thing is that I know there's an appeal there. I can see the appeal, and I want it to appeal to me as well. So it's I think that's where some of the frustration comes in, and maybe it never will. Maybe it will. Maybe it won't. But I think that is a big part of it is the pace. The concept is perhaps not necessarily what I'm used to or what I was expecting, and again playing single player as opposed to co-op. But I also do think that reflecting on it, the amount of variables is perhaps something that I've been turned off a little bit by having to deal with all the variables in MyCAREER. And even though it's a different type of variables and a different type of gameplay, it's kind of like I just want to ball,
Yeah, exactly. And I think that there, like you had said, there's certain things that you don't get in other games, like arcade games, like not inbounding the ball.
Yeah.
Right. Like the ball goes through the hoop and you're just down the court.
Yeah.
And if somebody has a certain ability, Sometimes, you get the ball right after it goes through the hoop, and you get it, like, they use a power up and you get it knocked out of your hand immediately and they score. And then it can happen multiple times in a row. Like, I definitely see, like, the frustration aspects of it. But I love the outside of the box thinking by the developers. And like you said, it's not like functionally it doesn't work right.
No,
like it's a well-made game.
It's
Like
it's worthwhile. It's worthwhile having that type of game in addition to other types of basketball games. I'm not so much of a purist that I will say this shouldn't exist. I will say that perhaps, in my personal opinion, is it for me or not? And which at the end of the day I can. And I'm sure there are probably criticisms I could make that are more universal, more subjective about trying to block dunks. I feel is pretty tough.
Well, the problem with Dunk Lords with blocks, and I'm going to leave this in feedback because I'm going to do a whole write-up on this game, is instead of going for blocks,
uppercuts.
Yeah, you uppercut everything. You uppercut jump shots, you uppercut dunks, you're uppercutting in the backcourt. You're uppercutting.
Which kind of goes against what you expect of that game as well, which I think there is value in having some familiarity with that. And I think if the function is there that you can block dunks, you should be able to. So I think that would be my one more objective criticism of it. But everything else I think is more, is it a compatibility with the concept and me rather than the concept being bad? Because I don't think the concept is bad at all. I think it's more like
Yeah, the game is kind of a combination of basketball and battle royale.
Yeah.
Like, you're knocking each other over, you're pushing, you're using special abilities to knock the ball out of people's hands, you're, jumping 50 feet in the air after a power-up, and getting multiple dunks in a row. You're growing to 8 feet tall. Like, it is an absolutely crazy experience, but it's still basketball.
Yeah, and to that end, again, I don't believe in being such a purist that I can say, that shouldn't be a thing. Would I want it in every single arcade game? No. Would I want it in sim games? Absolutely not. But I do think there is value in having those different experiences, and we each have to decide whether it's for us or not, and give it time to grow on us if we feel that there is something there, and if there's not, maybe you just skip on it completely. It's completely understandable. It is the call that we have to make it at the end of the day. But I think that is important as much as it is to not invalidate our own feelings about things and our impressions of games, but to also realize that personal preference is a thing and that not everything is made for everybody.
And we talked about this so many times, it's about understanding what other gamers want, right? It's about appreciating what other gamers want and saying, and looking at the game as a whole and say, hey, you know what? This doesn't appeal to me, but this is going to appeal to a lot of people, and I see why.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's being able to give your opinions and your impressions, but also to be able to look past them and to give that. Again, when people talk about objective reviews, they're not talking about absolutely no bias at all, because that's impossible. Reviews are a personal opinion and impressions to a certain point, but to be able to, on top of giving your own personal feelings about it, to describe the game and to evaluate it in a way that's beyond how you feel, and say, well, I would recommend it to you if you like this, or I wouldn't recommend it to you if you feel this way. That's very important, and I think we again at the top of the show we were talking about reviews. Earlier in the show we were talking about reviews and personal bias and things like that. It is looking out for the audience as well, as much as giving your own opinion and saying this didn't appeal to me, but also giving people the information to whether they can make an informed decision whether it's going to appeal to them. That's very important to have it when you're doing a review, a valuable review, to be able to give that perspective as well.
Right, exactly. And I also want to make a point, because like I said, I think we have PBA Basketball Slam who listens to this podcast now. There's space for you in Dunk Lords in this. Like, I want to make a point that these two games being wildly different is the way it should be.
It's great, yeah.
Like, I'm really glad that people have the options for both. So, the stuff that I credit Dunk Lords for is not stuff that I'd want in PBA Slam. That's another very important point.
Yeah.
There's certain things that I like in PBA Slam I wouldn't want in Dunk Lords. So it's very good that the games are different. It's a positive thing to have both those games as options for people. Just like Virtua, for example, Virtua Tennis and Topspin, in the tennis industry, for, the 2000s games. Virtua Tennis was a loose, more arcadey feel. Topspin was supposed to be more realistic and whatnot. There's room for those two different games, for those two different titles. And I didn't want those two titles to be similar. I just wanted them both to be fun.
I think you look back at the day, there was a lot of NBA Jam clones that tried to imitate the success of that. And sometimes they did their own thing, for better or worse. Sometimes they should have followed the Jam formula more closely. Other times, maybe they should have innovated more and had something different. So I absolutely agree that there is Dunk Lord should be its own thing, and PBA Basketball Slam Arcade Edition should be its own thing. And there is value in there having those different experiences. And again, different experiences to NBA Playgrounds and NBA 2K and NBA Live, as we want that to come back. And if it ever comes back, if they ever come back, I should say, NBA Jam and NBA Street, if Live ever resurrects them, they should also be their own thing. And Jam, maybe they're going to share technology, especially if they're all made by games made by the same developer. That will probably share the tech, but they should stand apart. And I do like that about Jam and Street, is that although they are similar in some ways, they also have their own distinct aesthetic, themes, overall concepts, and even in the controls with the tricks that you do with the NBA Street, as opposed to where Jam is that straightforward, high-flying, ridiculously high-flying dunks. That is the thing that Jam is about, whereas Street is exaggerated, but not to the same extent of flying 60 feet in the air and making the rim catch on fire and whatnot. It's more an exaggerated
Street
stuff.
was also about combos and stuff too.
Yeah.
Like, so they're just completely different. They have different concepts, but both work so beautifully.
Exactly, and that's what we need. Variety being the spice of life.
Exactly. That's what we hope when NBA Live, like you said, returns. We hope that it has its own footprint, and obviously some of the gameplay is going to be similar because they're replicating the same sport. It's basketball between the lines, but it should have its own feel, and it should hopefully be a lot of fun.
I would expect more crossover between Live and 2K because they are trying to be that sim game, but still doing things in their own way.
Exactly.
So before we talk a little bit about the PS5 pre-order debacle, anything else we've been playing this week? I've actually been playing, because I'm resuming my 25th anniversary of NBA Live retrospectives to finish them before the year ends, and of course the year is end of the year is very rapidly approaching of 2020. I've been playing a bit of Live 08 on 360. I said it in my review, which will be coming out very soon, Derek, but especially after Live 07, and we've talked about the roughness of Live 07, Live 08 on 360 and PS3, I look, playing that now, I actually wish I'd spent a bit more time with it. It's actually quite solid. It was quite a step up. And yes, 07, you may say, is a low bar. But I thought 08 was a very pleasing improvement, and I didn't really realize it at the time because I was focusing so much on the disappointing PC version. But the 360 PS3 version is actually, it's pretty solid, and has some pretty solid ideas all around, and some innovative stuff with the modes as well.
Live 08 is just wildly different than Live 07, from the graphics direction to the player models to the movement, all of it. It's just completely different. My issue with Live 08 is it just feels sluggish. I feel like running up the floor feels sluggish. It doesn't feel to me like a truly fun, fast-paced basketball game. I think that they definitely improved a lot on with Live 08 over Live 07, and I definitely feel like they improved with Live 09 over Live 08, and then Live 10 was the culmination of it all. I think that Live 08, I think that Live 08 still needed a lot of work on the animations, but what you can tell they did with Live 08 is they made things a lot more smooth compared to Live 07. Like, overall, the movement and the etc. It's a lot more smooth. Feel like it feels better. It feels more like you can tell they really went hard for a sim direction with NBA Live 08, as opposed to Live 07, which was incredibly rocket dunk arcade action. So I definitely think that they started moving even more in the sim direction, which I've talked about this before with some of these older titles. So while I'm not, Live 08 isn't a game that I'm going to jump on and like choose to play, I can see where it improved over Live 07.
Yeah, and again, I probably wouldn't pop it in and play it on the regular, but having played it again, I was pleasantly surprised, and putting in perspective of coming from 07, it is definitely such a better feeling. I remember feeling at the time that it was better than '07, but I think I was so focused, especially in our community, on the legacy of the PC version that we do overlook that 360 PS3, the next gen release, or what was then next gen release, or current gen and prior gen. The terminology gets very mixed up at times, but that version for the consoles, for the more advanced version than that PS2 port we were getting on PC that had all the problems. It is a game that I think that I wish I spent a bit more time with. I will be talking about it in a Way Back Wednesday that's coming, but I discovered a retro roster that somebody made. I definitely didn't make it unless I'm going senile. I've completely forgotten. But the amount of work that's gone into it, I think I would have. I'd remember doing that. Quite frankly, it's I have to can't take credit for this roster, and it has some issues, but it's this. Well, I'll get into it more when I do the Way Back Wednesday on it, but I discovered this roster. I showed you some screenshots. It was like finding buried treasure, just finding this old roster and messing around with it.
I love seeing stuff like that. I love going back and finding mods that I might have forgotten about or whatnot, or downloading mods for older games that I had, like new discoveries and everything. I want to make a point too really quick though about Live 08. You talked about, hey, this feels pretty good. I wish I had spent more time with it. That's how I felt about NBA 2K6 revisiting it. I played NBA 2K6 and I uploaded a gameplay video recently for NBA 2K6 using the Warriors against the Raptors. And I'm playing this game and I'm like, hey, this game is really fun. Like, what a good debut for them on the Xbox 360 and whatnot. And NBA 2K6 was just a really fun, overall loose experience. You had the hold the ball out like Jordan thing on the perimeter and the quick acceleration to the hoop and the throwdowns. The shooting felt really good. It had a basic post game, but it was reactive. And you had like drop step dunks like around the hoop that sometimes would happen and everything. Not really in your control, but it would happen. And I'm just playing this game. I'm playing defense and offense, and I'm like, hey, this game is a lot better than I remembered, and I wish I had spent more time with it. So 2K6 is, for me, was maybe your Live 08.
It's really cool because I've found that with some older 2K games as well, and because it took me so long to get into the isomotion and some of the feel of 2K from coming from Live and its concepts. There are definitely 2K games I wish I spent more time with over the years, and it's one of those things where you can go back to them, but it's never quite the same, especially sometimes playing with the older rosters is more fun sometimes, but sometimes it is hard to go back for too long or make it the primary game again, but it is fun to dust them off and yeah, as you say, find these games that and you look at them and you can see parts that didn't age well. I sent you with that screenshot of Kevin Durant's cyberface in NBA 2K9 where he's kind of melted.
His face looks melted. Some of the faces are absolutely terrible in those older games.
When people say that faces from 2K9 are better than 2K19, I have to say, no, it's really not. There are some things that have definitely come a long way, and you can see the things that are dated, but at the same time, you can see the gameplay that feels good. You can see some of the innovation in the controls, innovation in the modes at the time, and you think, this is where it began. And there are a lot of things that are older than you think, whether it's shot meter mechanics or a certain feature in your franchise mode or even an online mode. Because online team play was introduced in NBA Live 08 in a post-release patch, a free update for the game that added online team play. That was the future of basketball gaming. We didn't know it at the time, but it turned out to be the future.
Yeah, we talked about the shot meter and shootout.
Yeah.
So over a decade.
So these things that are in older games turned out to be such a big deal, and yeah, I know also you've been playing a bit of, as you alluded to at the top of the show, NBA Jam 2010, and again, I'd love to get you on Fire Edition, the digital one, because that was, I feel, the definitive Jam as much as anything. But Jam 2010, and I'm overdue to do a Way Back Wednesday on it, to do a full retrospective on it. I'm still deciding whether I want to do video or written on that, but it was really hurt by, first it was going to be coming out for the Wii, then it was going to be coming out as packaged with the 360 and PS3 version of NBA Elite 11. NBA Elite 11 gets cancelled, so then they'd make it a standalone game. People think they're going to try and... There was a big misconception at the time, I don't know if you remember, but people were saying, oh, they're charging full price for something we're going to get for free, even though what was going to be in Elite 11 was a stripped-down version of Jam 10, and there was going to be DLC that expanded it to the full game. And people slept on that game and overlooked it and were very down on it because they thought it was they didn't seem to understand the issue. And of course, the whole thing with NBA Elite 11 getting cancelled also soured people on the EA brand. But that is as good a jam as you will find. 2010, I believe. It's a very solid remake of the original with some new twists like the boss battles and things like that. The classic campaign mode is a little bit repetitive. That is something they fixed up on Fire Edition with the road trip. But as far as gameplay is concerned and the aesthetic and everything, the only thing that really bothers me about it as someone who really loves Tournament Edition back in the day, the follow-up to the original NBA Jam, is that there's no injuries and there's no real reason to substitute unless you pick a bad matchup. Although it is good to have the multiple players to choose from, there's just no reason to substitute if you pick a good line, basically. But that Jam 2010 is a fantastic Jam game.
The gameplay and the graphics are just awesome. And what more could you ask for, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you want more depth sometimes and whatnot, but if you want a loose, pick up and play, jump into a co-op game or just go against each other and whatnot, what more can you ask for? It's just a really fun game. I uploaded a gameplay video of me using the Lakers, Kobe and Pa in the first half, Kobe and Odom in the second half. And it's just, I'm playing this game. It's just really loose, fun action. Shot blocking's fun. Alley-oops are fun. The shooting is sound. It's a really solid game. And like you said, it's worthy of the NBA Jam name. So I definitely enjoyed my time with it. And you asked what I was playing. Yeah, NBA Jam 2010, NBA Playgrounds, the first one, a little bit of Dunk Lords, some PBA Basketball Slam, NBA 2K19, NBA 2K21. And we also played a game of NBA 2K17. So definitely been jumping around quite a bit, and I have the all-time teams roster. So I've definitely kept busy over the last couple of weeks with basketball gaming.
Again, it's the benefit of having a large collection.
Yeah, exactly. And how nice is it to be able to talk arcade hoops? It's nice. It's nice to be able to talk new arcade hoops titles and evaluate them and talk about what they could do better or what they're doing well and the different options in them and styles and like I said, it's nice to be able to kind of branch away from sim hoops just for a minute to talk about something that was a big part of our childhood.
Absolutely.
Arcade hoops were a big part.
Absolutely, and it is. They have always been. I was an NBA Live gamer back in the day, but I was also an NBA Jam gamer as well. It cleansed the palate. When you got sick of Jam, you would play some NBA Live. When you felt like the change of pace, you went back to Jam. That my cousin and I, that's what we did. And when we had a great deal of fun with that, or the NBA Hang Time, when that came out, by changing it up like that is the value of having those different types of basketball games. And of course, within a sim game like a Live or a 2K, having the different modes does allow you to do that to some extent, but having a completely different genre to be able to change it up with a Jam or a Dunk Lords or PBA Basketball Classics, to be able to have that different experience, but it still feeds your love of basketball. I think that is why having such a range of games that come out at the one time, or recent or new games, is why it's so important. It's why we want to see the competition between 2K and Live. It's why we want to see Jam and Street come back. It's why we support these other games from the indie developers. It's just be able to change it up. I have games in my collection. Will I play them that much? Probably not. Beyond covering them for Way Back Wednesday, but I'll pull them out every once in a while for just for a bit of fun. Will I pull out Jam It very often? Probably not, compared to NBA Jam, for example. But it is they are interesting to have in the collection and to just mess around with it, and like a Slam City with Scottie Pippen, something like that. Is it probably?
I got to make a video on that. Yeah. That's the other game I put on. I got to make a video on that.
And is that the best basketball game ever made? No, but there is something special, and it certainly appealed to you that that there is something there, and if there's something there for you, it's something you can revisit.
Right now, I can't beat Fingers. I've been so disconnected from Slam City. Fingers is the first guy that you play, and I just can't beat him. He just keeps beating me over and over again. I gotta figure out the mechanics again because they're definitely quirky.
Don't you hate that?
Yeah, I just got to figure it out. So I think I've lost to Fingers like 6 or 7 times. I might post my victories and whatnot on YouTube. But the other part, the element that we talked about on prior shows is just fun is, you got your NBA with NBA Playgrounds, you got your PBA with that league, you got your you're using cats and bears in Dunk Lords. it's just nice to have the variety.
It is.
You know, for me, growing up, I grew up on NBA Jam, NBA Ballers, College Slam, which is an underrated title that nobody talks about. You know, college basketball games, NBA basketball games, and NBA Showtime on NBC, NBA Hang Time. You know, I grew up on, you know, Looney Tunes basketball, Acme Sports Challenge for the, you know, the Tiny Toons version and all that stuff. Like, I grew up on all of these games, so it's nice to go into my Steam library or to go into my game library and just be like, okay, well, you know what, I feel like playing with it using a bear today, so I'm going to use
as you do sometimes.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you know, every now and then you want to use a bear playing basketball. So it's just nice to have the variety.
The other game I picked up recently was not the World League Basketball that I've talked about before, which is the PAL version of the NCAA Basketball by HAL that you've played, and of course Super Dunk Shot is the Japanese version, but a PC game for Windows 95, World League Basketball by Mindscape and High Voltage Software. It's actually one that I've seen before and wanted to check out. So that's another one I'll be covering. You know, the other World League Basketball, fictional, another fictional World League, global basketball league, basically. It's actually kind of more like a FIBA tournament. But in any case, it's kind of cool to have, and it's cool to get to play these older games, ones that you haven't played, or the ones that you always thought you'd have or check out, or you never got to check out, or whatever. And that is one of the things that I do enjoy collector, is to be able to not just revisit the classics that I love, and that's always fun, but also the ones that I missed out on, and see, you know, okay, did I really miss out on anything, or you know, did I make the right choice of skipping it, or hey, there's something here, and yeah, there's a lot of games that I've picked up recently. The And1 basketball game, And1 Street Ball, Street Hoops, this World League Basketball, Jam It. Some of them better than others, but it's definitely fun to check out. And if I don't have those, I have a lot of other live and 2K and Jam games and whatnot to switch between.
2 games I'd like you to add to your collection. There's 2 that I grew up with that I really think it's important. 3, actually. 1, Coach K College Basketball, if you don't already have it. That game is just really fun.
Well, I've got an adapter now, so I'm looking to import some of those NTSC SNES games as well. Yeah. Yeah.
So Coach K, Dick Vitale's Awesome Baby College Basketball. It has the NCAA basketball camera. You know, where there's no crowd.
Yep.
And it's like 3D look. It's actually kind of a fun game. Dick Vitale's Awesome Baby College Basketball. And then the other one, oh my god, I just had it on the tip of my tongue. Oh yeah, Double Dribble Playoff Edition for Sega Genesis. So I think that those are 3 that I think you should add to your collection. And I actually think they're good basketball games. So.
With Genesis, it's going to come down to me getting a Mega Drive. So
I know.
So we'll see.
You said you have issues with that, yeah.
So it's just a matter of getting, you know, it's all budget. But they're all games that I'm, you know, it's one of those things that if it can be in the budget, and you think about, but no, I don't have every basketball game ever made at this point, but I've got a fair few.
Yeah, you definitely. I've seen some of your collection. I think you listed a bunch of it, and I'm just like, I can't even believe how many games you have. I have a ton. You've seen some of my collections. I think I posted some pictures on Twitter at one point about it too, between Steam and my console collection. But you definitely still have more than I do.
It's you know, I don't think don't think I'll make the Guinness Book, but it's not about that. It's about satisfying the my own tastes and whatnot. But we will circle back to that, of course. That is retro gaming. As we look to the future of gaming, we do have release dates and prices for the PlayStation 5 and Xbox One. There is, of course, an Australian markup, as I knew there would be. The disc edition of the PS5, which I'm looking at, Get Derek, is actually 750 Australian dollars. But I do have time to save up for it, of course, because with the way the pre-orders are going, I probably won't get it till 2021.
So let me get this straight. So $750 for the disc version. So basically, you can get a $500 version, but it just doesn't take discs. So everything's digital. Is that it?
The digital edition is like about 500. It's about 200 cheaper. Yeah.
But there's no difference other than it just can't take discs.
Unlike the Xbox, the Xbox has got a few different versions as far as power. It's the same power. It's just like an extra 100 or 200 for a. Is it 100 or 200? Well, it's certainly over 100 more for, or around about 100 or more for a disc version. Yeah, for the Blu-ray.
Yeah, and I see why you need that. why you would want that. I was thinking about this. My brother and I actually talked about this last night. He's a huge Final Fantasy fan, and they're coming out with a Final Fantasy for PS5, and it's exclusive. So we made a deal where he's going to buy the PS5, and I'm going to buy the Xbox Series X.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I'm going to bring the Xbox Series X is because I believe that on launch, I'm guessing my Elgato is going to work. And I'm not sure if that's true or not. I need to look into it. But as we know, there's been issues with Elgato working with PlayStation.
Because of the HDCP, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know if that's going to be a case, but I think that I'm going to buy the Xbox Series X. He's going to buy the PS5, and we live together. So we're going to end up having both. What are you doing?
I'm just going with PS5 because I already have the PlayStation Plus subscription, which covers already PS4 and PS3. Depending on what happens with PS4, I mean, I could probably maybe trade it in, depending on what happens. But I kind of not want to do that until I see how everything works with backwards compatibility with all games, and also transferring data across as well. That'll be the big thing. So I'll just be going PS5 because it's I've already got the 2K21 for it as well, thanks to getting the Mamba Forever edition for PS4. So I'm just going to stick with that this generation. But again, it's one of those things where I'm definitely going to have to get on the pre-order as soon as I'm allowed, and it's just allowed as soon as it opens up again with Australian retailers, and then it's just a matter of getting in the line, which is what I need to do. Get in the line, because it probably, there's no guarantee that it'll be there on launch. I got the PS4 on launch. That's actually the first console I've got at launch, the PS4. Everything else was at least a little bit afterwards. But it's that's what I'm going with, PS5. And again, it's not about fanboyism. Like, I have nothing against Xbox. I have an Xbox 360. Of course, I've had 3 of them thanks to various errors. But that's beyond the point. That's the 360. The Xbox One was better in that regard, as I understand it. But yeah, I'm going to stick with with PlayStation. It's what most of the people that I play with are going to have, and I've got 2K21 lined up for it already. The free edition, thanks to the Mamba Forever edition of PS4. PlayStation only already got a subscription that's going to be current for all 3 consoles that I have, the 3 to 5. So that's basically my rationale. It's one of those things, right? I also don't really have any interest in the exclusives, so that's a non-factor for me as well. What I'm going to play is likely to come out on all consoles plus PC as well, so that's never really been an issue for me. The only exclusives I've ever really been interested in are so like a Mario and Zelda for Nintendo, and I haven't had a Nintendo console for years, new Nintendo consoles for years, so it's kind of a moot point for me.
Yeah, I kind of fell out of interest in those type of games too.
I wouldn't mind. I've seen them do some good things.
And, I jump on and I played Mario 2 for fun. The other night, I want to say it was a couple of weeks ago. It was still fun to put on and stuff, but it's not right now at this point in my life. For some reason, it's just not the type of game that I'm into.
Sure. Yeah.
So I'm kind of with you too as well. I'm not much for exclusives, but my brother is. So Final Fantasy is a big deal to him.
Yep.
And they're not bringing that game to PC. So, and like I said, if we're both splitting it and he's buying that and I'm buying the Xbox Series X and we're just using our income that way, then that makes the most sense. So, I mean, it will be nice to have both systems. But
I feel like it's probably not going to be like 12 months until it actually gets a fair amount of titles that everybody's interested in. That's how I felt with PS4. I felt there wasn't much at launch, apart from the basketball games, that really I had that much of an interest in.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. For me too, if you remember correctly, 99% of my gaming is on PC. So for me, the PC titles, I just like the flexibility on PC. I like to be able to, the way I access my games on PC. I like how the different options I have on PC and everything. So for me, still, PC is going to be my primary source of gaming.
Yeah, and it's going to be one of mine too, because obviously I do have the gaming PC. So it's I've always gamed on both PC and console. I know that's something that maybe seems strange to a lot of people, and obviously you do too. But the people that are staunchly one or the other, I've had games that have come out on both that I've liked. The ones that are console exclusive, others that are PC exclusive, or the PC has been better for modding reasons or whatever. And it's just that's just been always the way I approached it. I'm not. I mean, I was Nintendo growing up in the Nintendo versus Sega wars in the 90s, but I haven't really bothered with console wars since then. It was exciting as a 12-year-old. As a 35-year-old, it's kind of I'm not really much for fanboy wars these days.
Yeah, I grew up with both Sega and Super Nintendo, and Sega CD.
That's best of both worlds, then.
And then Jaguar, and whatnot, Jaguar, and what a system. We should do a whole podcast on Jaguar someday. But yeah, anyway, yeah. So I grew up
CDI.
Yeah, the whole console wars thing and the whole I'm better than you, or look, it reminds me of the iPhone Android stuff. Oh look, Twitter from Android. That's supposed to be like an insult.
Is that what the insult is? I've always wondered about that. So it's not. It's
because you're using an iPhone. It's iPhone superiority.
That's all it is. It's not like you're old because you're using Android or you're wrong for posting from your phone. It's literally just choice of brand.
Yeah, I've had it used on me because I use an Android. Like it says Twitter from Android on mine when I post. It's just a brand thing. It's like a superiority complex.
That's all it is. I've wondered about that.
In reality, I could say to them, hey, you spent over $1,000 on your phone, and what you're doing right now using your phone, I can do the exact same thing with my $100 Android. So, yeah, somehow you're superior for spending about $1,000 more than I did on your phone when I can do the exact same thing right now.
So, again,
it's give me a break.
So this is something again that I've had my discoveries on the NLSC podcast that I haven't had my finger on the pulse of. I always wondered why people. I thought there must have been more to the joke or more to the insult than simple brand loyalty. But that's all it is. It's just like you're posting from an Android phone, so your opinion doesn't make sense, or your opinion is less because you're doing it. That's all it is. Brand choice.
That's all it is. It's a superiority.
I mean, I thought it was stupid anyway, but that's even stupider than I thought. And it would go the other way as well to say that your opinion, what you're saying doesn't matter. Because it's that is seriously on the level of dismissing my opinions on basketball because I'm a Bulls fan and they're not doing it well at the moment. That's on that level. That's what that is.
Right, exactly. So if you've seen that, like I said, I've had that happen to me a couple times, and it's like, I shouldn't take. Oh, look, Twitter from Android, that explains everything. Like literally, that's what you'll get. It's like, give me a break.
So again, a completely unrelated idea, a completely unrelated thing. So that's even dumber than I thought. So yeah, that's there you go. But
just know, people that listen to the NLSC podcast, I have an Android and it's a Samsung, but obviously it shows up Twitter for Android and whatnot. Just to let you know, I'm not ashamed of it. I'm taking this podcast. I'm using this phone for this podcast right now, and it works beautifully.
Yep. So I mean, I'm using a Windows PC, but I do actually have an Android phone. So yeah. But a lot of my tweets do come from Windows desktop, so you won't see you won't see it for that. But when I do post from my phone, it will say Twitter for Android.
Right. I could see if Andrew posted on Twitter and it said posted from Windows 95. I could see somebody saying, "Well, listen." This is Windows 90.
Not a better browser than Netscape 4. It's all downhill from there. Chrome, what? Yeah.
Jesus.
But so that is the situation. We may get a PS5. It depends on when they open that up. But it's a bit of a mess. But hopefully they sort that out.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I got to get my pre-orders in for the systems. I do want to use them on day one. I also want to be able to upload some videos to my YouTube channel because I think that people are going to want to see it, right? People are going to want to see how the gameplay is.
2K21.
And I want people to be able to watch those videos and say, hey, look, this is for me and whatnot. And I take pride in trying to upload some good gameplay and whatnot. So that is one of my goals, is to get some early videos out.
So stay tuned to see if we actually get those consoles. If we are the lucky, blessed few to have it. One bit of a PSA, bit of a public service announcement here. There's a lot of scams going around at the moment with people trying to give, allegedly giving away consoles and trying to flip them for ridiculous amounts and everything. Don't buy into that.
Yeah, I mean, we knew this happens every cycle,
every generation,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, except unfortunately, this is the height of social media, the height of hacking, and the height of spam, and the height of all of this stuff. So yeah, definitely be careful, be wary, use trusted sources. If you can go in person, etc. So.
And certainly a lot of these ones, again, retweet for a chance to win. Look at who's doing that, because there's, again, a lot of scammers out there and people who have got the pre-orders in who are looking to flip them and make a profit on them. It's almost like ticket scalping in a way. I'd say just don't support that, because it's one of those things. Don't support things that hurt your fellow gamer, and because they will come back to haunt you as well.
And as I learned recently, don't give strangers money unless you... I'll get into that on another show.
I'm not giving it back, by the way. But,
they will block. They will block you. They will block you.
Yeah.
You can lend them. You can lend them money. You can be a nice guy. You can give advice. But at the end of the day, if you don't give them more, they will block you. So yeah.
Bit awkward. I got you on the podcast after I did that to you, but anyway.
Yeah, you would never do that.
Nevertheless, well, we'll see. No, I wouldn't. But that has brought us to the end of episode 341 of the NLSC podcast. We thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed it. The show, of course, comes out each and every week on the NLSC, which is nba-live.com. We're also on all the major podcatching apps and platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, etc. Search for NLC Podcast, look for our logo, and that will be us. Of course, we also appreciate any reviews on platforms that support them to stroke our ego and, of course, to help spread the word about the show. And, yes, certainly if you'd like to help us spread the word about the show on your various social media, Twitter, for example, then we certainly do appreciate that. Before I get into our socials, of course, where can we find you, Derek?
I'm on YouTube, D for Free, on the NLSC, D for Free as a contributor over there. And I'm working on an all-time teams roster for NBA 2K21 with no duplicates, adding a bunch of missing players. Shua Joda has been nice enough to reach out and say he's going to make some faces for missing players as well. So keep an eye on that. It's nice to dive into making, a roster, because I haven't really got into it since NBA 2K17. I'm on Twitter at D4384. I'll be releasing episode 5 today, hopefully, of Holding Court with D43, where we dive deep into the Celtics versus Heat series. Clyde Drexler over Reggie Miller, which that should be well known and a common opinion and a common take. And the worst Twitter takes of the week in the mailbag. And then I'm also looking at recording Holding Court, Virtual Hoop Dreams with Swaggy Piolino. So I have a lot going on right now, but I am trying to keep busy in these times.
So definitely check out Derek's stuff with the aforementioned places. Of course, as a contributor in the NLC forum, look out for that mod as well. As for my mod, the NBA 2K11 rosters, still working on that. If people would like to lend a hand with the faces, Maravich has done a great job, but he is just one person so far. If you can lend a hand with some faces, maybe some conversions from 13-14. I know a few of the people who have done the 13-14 faces, 2K13, 2K14 faces, that is. Obviously, we want 19-20 season faces. That's from those games. They have given their permission to do some conversions. If you can help out with that, that would definitely be appreciated. You can check out my topic in the NBA 2K11 modding section for more updates on that. As for my socials, I'm on Twitter at AndrewNLSC. The NLSC itself is on Facebook and Twitter, the NLSC on both. On Instagram, we are NLSC Basketball. On YouTube, we are NBA Live Series Center. And of course, keep it locked to the NLSC itself, nba-live.com, for everything we do for basketball video games. But yes, that's all for this week. Thank you once again for tuning in. Until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone.